What are Reddit's greatest mysteries of all time? There was a guy on the legal advice Reddit who claimed that every time he stepped outside, whether the front or back door, his neighbor would honk their horn. He said it would happen every single time without fail, but not when anyone else in his household went out. He also said it was happening for several years. Everyone suggested he had a mental illness, which was a likely explanation, but I wish we got an update from that guy. There was an account called Is There Life After Lyme, as in Lyme disease. I discovered the account about a year ago, and I was fascinated reading these past comments and posts. It appears to belong to a woman who at first thought she had Lyme disease, but actually had a degenerative brain disease, whose husband left her for another woman and eventually gained custody of their child. A lot of us who followed believed that her LLMD essentially did this to her by insisting on giving her sketchy alternative medicine that seemed to be inducing frequent and severe psychotic episodes for a disease that she almost certainly didn't have. Who knows if she had some other disease or mental health issue, but the treatments that she was taking for years certainly didn't seem to be helping and were apparently causing her hallucinations and delusions. This, according to her, was a sign that they were working, despite seeing no improvement in her original symptoms. The comments eventually turned into her begging for the guy to give her daughter back. She resumed posting for a little bit after getting out of jail, but now her account is gone again. There was a post in the relationship Reddit maybe a year ago from a woman who had found some disturbing content on her boyfriend's computer. He had gone out of town and she was looking through his laptop and found out about his extreme and very specific interests in all matters pertaining to the boudoir, namely the domination and bringing about of pain on the other party. If I recall correctly, she was an Asian woman, and his fantasies about that stuff apparently focused on Asian women. She said some other stuff, like about how he'd go out of town on hunting trips with old buddies for days at a time, but she'd never met any of these friends. There was some other circumstantial, potentially disturbing stuff. And she deleted the post soon after, and I never saw anything about it, but a lot of people were telling her to get out of the house before he got back. There was a post a few years ago about a guy who had served in the military, had PTSD, and his wife and partner would jump out and scare him, despite him making it known he didn't like it. One day he was in the bathroom and she burst in, surprising him, and he turned around and punched her fair in the face. He was scared and didn't know what to do or whether he'd be charged, and never posted any follow-ups. Still wondering what happened to that one. Well, that's just a really sad story no matter what way you look at it. And there are still no updates. In case you were wondering, folks, don't punch your partners, and definitely don't jump out at traumatized folks because they may not have much control over how they respond. There was a post on WTF about 5 years ago where someone killed someone and took pics of their decapitated head with sunglasses. The mods took it down because apparently reverse image search showed nothing. I think it was from the relationship Reddit. Woman who thought she was being tricked by her boyfriend. She described smelling cooked fish, but he'd served chicken for dinner. Eventually, commenters convinced her to go to the hospital. She updated with, "It's a brain tumor. I have surgery tomorrow." I still think about that post, and I never really found out if things worked for her. It legitimately freaked me out. It was really weird things too, like she'd think her boyfriend told her that he was cooking salmon, she'd smell salmon cooking, and then she'd walk into the kitchen and he'd have made lasagna. Or that he would have told her that he was going out that evening, and then she'd come home and he'd be like, "Didn't we agree that we'd do a movie night?" Or something like that. She thought her boyfriend was playing mind games with her and was super confused. And then the edit was just, "This is scary, but I have a tumor in my brain. I'm having surgery tomorrow." Another one from the relationship Reddit. A few years ago, there was this post. If I remember right, a family friend was staying with a married couple after being diagnosed with cancer and being incredibly down on his luck with prior ailments. The wife started noticing inconsistencies in this friend's stories, and him never wanting company to any of the doctor's visits seemed a little odd. She was also questioning how he could appear in relatively good health while claiming he's receiving aggressive treatments for his health issues. She posted because she was growing suspicious and wanted validation if it was odd, and if so, how to approach her husband with it. Fast forward to a few months back, and there's a sword and scale episode about it. Apparently the friend attacked and killed her, knifed the husband too, and then tried to self-delete. He was faking all along while stealing money from the wife's company. I've searched for the post, but I haven't been able to find it. There was a page asking older virgins why they were still virgins, and this 40-something-year-old guy answered, and then his last sentence was some joke about not wanting to be alive anymore. People kept prying, and he eventually said something about waiting for his mother to pass away so he could self-delete guiltlessly. I think he said she had just died and he planned to do it in about 3 months or something. He had this thing all planned out and thought through. He said no one could talk him out of it, and after going through more and more of his post history, he seemed more and more genuine and not at all like a troll. He was very polite about the whole thing, if that makes any sense. I thought about saying anything at all to him, but everyone else who did was politely thanked and dismissed, and I couldn't think of anything original, so I held off. I had his comments saved, and I remember checking in on it sometime later, well after those 3 months, and he hadn't posted anything after that point. I still think about it from time to time. There was a really creepy post from a guy who found a bunch of Wi-Fi signals from a hole in the ground in Hawaii and linking the owner to a strange eBay store that sells, quote, broken hard drives with very happy customers. All the reviews were people being way overly enthusiastic about these broken hard drives, which sold for a good chunk of money. There was a girl telling a story about how she was 6 months or so out from marrying her fiancé. Nothing seemed to be wrong with the relationship, and they absolutely loved each other. However, one day he went out to go get milk, but never came back. He even bought the milk too because they saw the charge, but nobody knows what happened to him. I think this happened a very short while ago too. Okay, found it. But I think she deleted the comment since it's not in the original thread anymore. Here's what she posted. My fiancé disappeared. We were both 27 and have been a couple since the age of 16. Friends before that. A little bit over 2 years ago, we started a sort of road trip all over the country with our own self-made tiny house on wheels. We had the most fun ever just traveling with the two of us. We did this for all this time, and 7 months ago, while lying on our bed and talking, he just asked me if I wanted to marry him. I obviously said yes. Things just got even better from there. A week after that, he went to the store in the city we were currently living in while I'd already started cooking, and he never came back. He made it to the store and bought the stuff we needed, but he never came back. No one has heard of him since, not even his mum, who he was Skyping with every evening as long as we had connections available. I've lost everything. He was my boyfriend, fiancé, best friend, and also the only real friend, because it was only us two for the last years. I've pretty much given up on everything and have gotten really sick and have horrible health problems. I've also lost close to 25 kilos and I'm now extremely underweight. All of that in the last 6 months. I just want to know something, anything. There was a guy who showed up in Ask Reddit asking how his newborn child could have absolutely none of his traits in blood. A whole list of things were proposed, including that his wife was a chimera, not the mythological beast. Of course, eventually someone posted the most obvious theory, that the kid wasn't his. He said that was impossible, and after a few hours he said he was going to get a paternity test done just to show us. The next day he posted that it was done, and when he had the results in a few days, he'd post a picture to prove us all wrong. 2 days later, the post and account were deleted. If true, guessing the test went badly. There was a teenage girl who posted in the relationship Reddit a long time ago for dealing with her mum. The girl was extremely sick and the mum was crazy and thought that the cure for every disease was just eating more vegetables and didn't believe in doctors. Everyone was telling this poor girl to go to the emergency room ASAP because of the symptoms she listed. I just hope she's okay. Some guy found a coffin in his driveway. Inside it were a key and a piece of paper with geographical coordinates on it. He posted them. I went there and took pictures. It was a cemetery. The exact coordinate was actually between several graves. And no, I did not dig any of them up to solve the mystery. This was almost certainly an expensive prank, or one from someone who had a spare coffin for reasons unknown, but the infinitesimally small chance that one of these graves contained some sort of mystery or treasure is the kind of thing that'll scratch some of our brains forever. Very, very weird and wonderful. You know, there's a couple of posts I wonder about. One with the guy whose wife was pregnant, but he got fixed many years ago, and another one with the kid who found a spy camera in his foster parents' bathroom. A couple years ago, there was a young woman on the Raised by Narcissists Reddit whose parents were part of a deeply Christian faith and had arranged for her to marry a guy her age. She couldn't go to school, she couldn't have a job, her parents would lock her out of the house, and she was basically forced to live in a small backyard cabin with her soon-to-be husband. She had to hide the fact that she was posting because if her future husband found out, her parents would become violent. She was very scared of them. The parents gave the underage guy alcohol, and to put it lightly, he was not a good partner. But she couldn't do anything about it because the state she lived in would return runaways, and CPS had been around but never actually did anything. One day, she made a post that her husband had seen her posts. She was scared he'd ask questions, and then never posted again after that. I just wanted her to know that if she's still out there, we're still counting down to her 18th birthday. I hope you get free from those people. That person who won the $100 million jackpot was trying to escape his family and friends who were after his money. Where are you now, friend? Ha, nice try, family member. Oh yeah, I remember that thread. Nightmare Expo did a video on that on YouTube. Apparently his mother tried to poison him, but it didn't kill him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A young girl, about 19 if I remember, posted on relationships about her father. He had a shed that he banned all members of his family from entering, and one day she went in. He had his computer in there. If I remember correctly, there were photos on the computer which showed animals that had been subjected to some horrible treatment and then dismembered. The photos had clearly been taken in the shed. She said her dad was the perfect conservative father. He seemed to realize that she had used his computer and things were tense in the house. She deleted the post within a few hours. There was the one about the guy who went with his girlfriend to visit her parents, and in the middle of the night she got up and he thought he heard certain noises coming from the next room, leading him to believe the whole family was into some pretty immoral and illegal stuff, but he never posted an update after he said he was going to confront her about it. There was one with a 16 or 17-year-old kid who had just found out he apparently had a letter tattooed on his back that he never knew about. He had gone swimming with his friend and they commented on it. Never read an update and I can't find the post now. I've been wondering about him ever since. There was a kid who took his car to the mechanic for routine work or something, and the mechanic found a GPS tracker attached to his car. Someone who worked at that place that manufactured the devices commented that it was a specific model GPS tracker that only law enforcement use. And that's when crap hit the fan and things took off. I believe the original poster started connecting the dots and then the feds showed up out of nowhere trying to intimidate him. Turns out the FBI was tracking this kid. He found out when the FBI showed up at his house when he tried to sell the device on Craigslist. There are news articles about it and everything. His best friend, Khaled, had apparently made a suspicious blog post about a bomb and a mall. When the car owner asked his friend about it, he said he'd written something stupid but wasn't involved in any wrongdoing. There was the guy who posted about finding a weird hidden chamber behind a sealed manhole inside a motorway bridge as a teenager. Inside was a chair facing a wall with a picture of an undressed woman in a fairly grisly crime scene. The finder delivered and went back years later and took photos. They're frickin' terrifying. There was a post about a guy who sold his house and secretly lived at the bottom of the garden afterwards, but I can't find it anymore. There was one where a lady was cleaning her house and found a tooth, and somebody jokingly said, "Someone's living in your crawl space." But then a dentist looked at the tooth and revealed it was in fact a child's. The lady concluded there was certainly no child living in her attic. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in her place though. So she went into the attic and says there are some things up there and calls the cops. The next day she updates that there was indeed a dude just chilling in her attic, looking at adult magazines, peeping on her shower, stealing her lacy undergarments, and collecting number 1 and 2 in jars. Turned out to be the local church pastor. It was insane to read that as it played out in real time. It's by far not the most mysterious post on Reddit, but certainly in our little community over on Reddit Argentina. Basically, the user AmITheA made a post stating he wanted to visit Villa 31, an infamous slum over there. He wanted to talk with the people living there, walk around, and stuff like that. Everyone either advised against it, told him to find an insider as a guide, or joked about his death. And that was his last post 3 years ago. Never to be heard from again. We're pretty sure he's dead, but nobody knows anything for sure. The guy who actually somewhat credibly drew the conclusion that his mother was poisoning him with cyanide. Last he was heard from, he'd escaped to out of state. It was in the relationship Reddit. It was a self-described dwarf who said his tall girlfriend was mistreating him. He needed advice on how to or if he should leave. And the next day, the post was gone. I haven't found a follow-up and I'm really concerned for him. Anything the user Worthless319 posted. He seems like he's got some untreated mental disorder. He talked about shooting his own eggplant off, cooking it and eating it to please God or something, and he actually showed picture proof that he'd done that. He'd constantly post all of these weird questions about self-deletion for God or something until his post history ends with him saying how he was traveling across the country because he found someone who was willing to unalive him, But then he was headed back home because the guy was going to eat him after he died and he didn't want that. Also, he'd occasionally post cute pictures of his pets. Wow. Well, despite the very tempting prospect of seeing some cute little pets, I might have to forgo the opportunity to look up that profile because it sounds like there'd be some things that I just don't really ever want to have burned into my brain there. Yet another one from the relationship Reddit, in which a woman seemingly caught her nephew hiding some recording device at the bathroom she and her family used. The nephew was 18 years old. I remember she did one update where she talked to her husband and he wanted to involve the police, and she said she would probably do that and would update later. It's been maybe a year now, but couldn't find an update. Not so much a mystery as it's clear what happened, but we never got closure on it. The user Flippin'Flop's Datura post in the Substance Reddit. For those of you who don't know, Datura is an extremely potent medicine, or poison, that's classified as a hallucinogenic deliriant. Unlike psychedelics, they give true hallucinations that are not discernible from reality. Like you'll see your friend come into the room, have a long conversation, only to have them disappear into smoke. It's also a very confusing and disorienting substance that obliterates short-term memory and lasts a long time. Even in the Substance Reddit, a community where regular substance misuse is openly talked about, the consensus from everyone was, "Don't do it, dude, it's a horrible idea." The original poster decided, despite everyone saying, "Dude, don't do it," to go ahead with it anyway. Not too long after that, in that thread you can see him post, "Google.com how normal again, stop now." Then the next and last thing he posted was in the gaming Reddit where he says, "Please these big dog fighting nah okay," and then nothing else. Nobody knows if he died from taking too much, which isn't unlikely if what he said he took was true, he took a heroic dose. Or if he was a troll, or just suffered through that, or learned a lesson and quit substances forever. But there was nothing else posted by that account ever again. There was a guy who wanted to try smack. He was convinced he could give it up on demand. Everyone was telling him not to, and he did it anyway. The next 3 years of his posts, you could see his descent into addiction and cries for help to get out. I can't remember the username, but it was sad to see. The user Yay Video Games created a thread on the gaming Reddit and then spammed it with variations of the phrase "Steamworks goes Ubisoft DRM bye bye." He then wrote 4,000 comments on that thread that were all different in a non-predictable pattern, so it's unlikely that a bot did it. He also sometimes posted links to creepy, weird images and even a picture of a piece of paper filled with this exact phrase. People believe he went insane, but we don't really know what happened. 2 years ago, a woman posted about how her husband had started knowing things that happened in the house, like someone dropping by but never entering the house. All these things that happened while he wasn't there. She mentioned he might be monitoring her and seemed pretty frightened. Also mentioned that he was in IT and probably on Reddit. After getting a ton of advice, she never posted again. I'm surprised that nobody has brought up the guy who was in an accident and lived a whole life with a wife and child while he was unconscious for a few minutes post-accident. That one was pretty messed up. If I recall correctly, he snapped out of it by staring at a lamp in the corner of his fake family's house. Someone posted that their extension cord blew a fuse and they found some odd device. Turns out there was a SIM card in there, and after he posted he was going to put it in a phone, he never posted again. It was a reply on the Ask Reddit a couple of years back. The original question was directed at campers and the like, inquiring about what strange or creepy or unexplainable things they'd found in the wilderness. The reply detailed an experience that their brother had while orienteering, finding a crater in the middle of an uncharted forest with a 1940s-style ambulance in the center of it. The gurney was still in there but bent, and there were brown smears all over the walls. The original poster said that their brother could probably find it again but flat out refused to do so. Something about this has always haunted me, and I was hoping that there'd be an update when I dug through my saved posts to find this again, but it turns out the account hasn't been used in 2 years. 2 good ones, but I can't find the first one. It was a guy starting a conversation, asking how he could get a large amount of money, like right now, and everyone replying was not taking it too seriously until he posted a picture of some shady guys standing in a parking lot and staring in his direction, which seemed to imply he was probably in serious debt with some not very good people. He never made any replies after that. And the other one was when a guy found what seemed to be a GPS tracker in his car. At first everyone was talking about if he'd rented the car from somewhere shady, Maybe it was someone the government was tracking, until the guy realized that the device would explain his extremely jealous girlfriend always seeming to know where he was, like he'd be somewhere and she had just texted him asking what he was doing at that place. One of his last posts said he was going to confront her when he got home, since she wasn't replying to any of his texts. He didn't post anything since that. A post where a woman was recording her sleep and caught another voice in the recording. It legitimately freaked me out listening to it. A couple of months ago, there was a post from a Russian lady who was sharing text messages she received from a guy while she was in a movie. He got really angry that she didn't reply, not knowing she was in a movie. The guy worked for the company she worked for and had been hoping to ask her out. I wasn't a member of Reddit then, but I downloaded the app after my friend, who's on Reddit, showed me the post claiming the guy might be my boyfriend. And he was. The Russian lady's post made the front page, and she replied hundreds of times to people. She gave out enough information that I could see that it was my boyfriend who contacted her. I confronted him and he confessed. We broke up shortly thereafter. The Russian lady's account doesn't seem to be active anymore. I don't want to mention her name for privacy's sake. I don't blame her because she didn't do anything wrong. On the plus side, the entire event brought me to Reddit, and I've enjoyed my experience here. What made you realize there was something off about your friend's significant other? I met them as an already married couple, and everything seemed fine until she went into labor at my house. It was her second child, so she knew it was early labor and decided to rest on our couch while we hung out. We were going to watch her older child when she went to the hospital anyway, and our house is 30 minutes closer to the hospital, so it made sense for the three of them to hang out around our house until go time. That's when my husband and I started noticing her husband's strange behavior. He was a very charming guy and a very good father to his son, but he started making fun of his wife during contractions. He would roll his eyes and tell her to shut up if she made even the slightest groan. He joked that she was a wimp and was overreacting. The whole situation got so awkward that my husband insisted he go home to get their hospital bags, just to give this poor woman a break from her crappy husband. A few months after the birth of her second child, he hit his wife with his car while she physically tried to block him from leaving during an argument. He disappeared for days and didn't come home until she proved to him that she hadn't gone to the hospital or contacted the police. Thus began systematic abuse that continued for 2 more years, and she hid from me like an expert. He would hurt her and then threaten to withhold money for groceries if she said anything to anyone. I knew he was the worst, and I knew she often needed me to pick her up to get food from food pantries because he was bad with money. But I had no idea he was hurting her. She finally left him after he threw her through a window while she was 8 months pregnant with their third child. The story doesn't end there. After the divorce, he and his friend started making very inappropriate content featuring children. He had a full-on, toddler-level temper tantrum twice at a group game night. Once because during a trivia question he couldn't remember the planets in the solar system. Then in the same night, he got ragey playing Uno, threw down his cards and stormed out. We all kind of looked at each other and our friend. That was when he knew he was off. My friends and I were all in our mid-20s and he was over 30, so it was definitely not acceptable behavior. A couple of weeks later was my friend's birthday, so we all went out for the night and ended up at our neighborhood bar. He threw another temper tantrum, I think it was overscoring for darts or something equally ridiculous, and stormed out and peeled away in his car, leaving us with no ride home. This was pre-Uber or Lyft, and none of us wanted to spend money on a taxi, so we sobered up on the 2-mile walk back to my friend's house. Thankfully, she broke up with him not long after. She's now with a wonderful guy who not only knows the planets of the solar system, but also treats her a lot better. I wonder which of the presumably many tantrums broke the camel's back in that girl's mind. How many screaming rages are too many in a relationship? He tried to feel me up at her birthday party. I tried to tell her, but she took his side. We're no longer friends. Same. My childhood best friend introduced me to her boyfriend. They hug and he makes the "I wanna lick your hoo-ha" sign with the finger V with the tongue waving through it over her shoulder. I told her about it and she got mad at me. They ended up breaking up because he was cheating. When will these people learn? What the frick? I tried the argument, I have nothing to gain by telling you this. He, however, does have something to gain by lying to you. It didn't matter. This was even after she had caught him cheating when they first started dating and had caught him in creepy situations like having her call him by the same nicknames an ex gave him, giving her the same clothes he had given to an ex to wear. She found pictures of the ex in the same hoodie he asked her to wear for him. When she went off on us for arranging a campsite at another friend's wedding. They got married on a 20-acre farm and the reception was on site. Instead of agreeing to split a hotel room with one bed between 8 people, the arrangement would have been that she got the bed and the rest of us would sleep on the floor. Yeah, no. Where to start? The double date we went on where he corrected her on the difference between UFC and MMA, and she turned into the corner of the booth and didn't talk to anyone for the rest of the night. How he wasn't allowed to hang out with me either because I was dating someone and they might have hot friends, or I was single and needed a wingman. There was this time I used my dad's truck to help them move and she got mad at me. I don't remember why, I just remember her friends doing almost nothing and then leaving before we were done. The final straw for me, I decided she was an abusive shrew long before this, was when we were working for his parents' band on the riverboat concert. She got mad that we were hanging out, literally just talking on a small boat. She left the ring on the table and left the boat the second it docked. Unfortunately, they made up after this and have been living together for the last year. I'm hoping it ends soon. I was friends with this guy, and one day I was doing work for his mum and dad, so he came over to hang out with me while I worked. She called while he was there and he told me to be quiet. After he got off the phone, I asked why I had to be quiet, and he said because he didn't want her to know that he was hanging out with me while she was at work. So I asked again. He said because she'll get mad if he knows he's having fun while she's at work. They're married now with 2 kids, and I don't talk to them anymore. We played D&D with him, and it seemed like every week he'd say, "Rule number 1, don't touch the kids." He was a teacher. He always meant it as a joke, and it always made sense in context, but it didn't sit right with me. For one thing, no one thought it was funny the first time, so why call back to it? Also, the regularity with which he said it almost made it seem like a mantra to me. They arrested him last year for allegedly Snapchatting with an underage girl he met over the internet. In hindsight, there were a bunch of other warning signs too, but that was the one that initially weirded me out. My best friend's ex-boyfriend walked like he was trying to intimidate people. And every time he asked someone a question about someone's opinion, "Hey, what do you think of that statue? Do you like sauerkraut?" he'd respond to their answer with, "I had a feeling you were going to say that." It seems harmless, but it was every single time, and if you called him out on it, you couldn't possibly have known I was allergic to X. He lashed out in anger. Every time she tried to break up with him, he just cornered her and wouldn't let her leave the room until she relented. And even their couples therapist thought she should just leave him for her own safety after 2 or 3 sessions. He'd wait for her shift to end, just sitting in his car in the parking lot, and if she didn't come out fast enough, he'd storm into the building in a fury, but if she came out on time, he'd just leave. He wasn't there to pick her up, just to monitor her, which he also did through a GPS tracker he put in her car. She now has a restraining order and has moved twice. He broke into her apartment with a gun while she was asleep and just snuggled up behind her with the gun between them as if it was his eggplant, and that was how she woke up. Some other things included helping me move, but only to find out where I lived. After their breakup, he came to my door several times looking for her. When she was generally not here, he settled for monitoring my house. He was an extreme fitness nut who was obsessed with telling people whether or not he could bench them. Hint, usually not. Lots of gaslighting, I don't remember the details. Insisted on changing her cat's name, which didn't stick. Wouldn't let her not watch TV with him, even though there are 100 things she'd rather do than watch TV at any given time, up to and including a pap smear. This inspired multiple fights. Charmed her parents so successfully that they insisted she go to couples therapy to work out their differences, which were, "I don't want to be constantly monitored, also your general controlling behavior is creepy," versus, "You have nothing to hide if you're doing nothing wrong." Ultimately, their breakup was supervised by the couple's counselor who had building security waiting in the lobby and her hand on a panic button. Who knew she'd have that? He stormed into her work when she quit post-breakup because he decided that they'd fired her and his plan was apparently to threaten them to get her job back. He took her to court to argue against the restraining order. The judge looked at Friend's documentation and how she was leaning away from him even on opposite sides of the room because he was making kissy faces at her, and he granted the order. He made very public posts on some weightlifting social media thing about what a crazy ex-girlfriend he had and linked her profile to his own profile. Good God. I guess the feeling that there was something off began approximately a few seconds into your first meeting with him. Glad she got away. Was best friends with a dude. I'm a lady. I'd been for a few years, there was no chemistry or anything like that, at least on my end. He got out of a long-term relationship and started dating around. He'd often introduce me to these ladies as a sort of barometer of whether or not he thought they were a good match. One weekend he invited a girl out with our group. She's super standoffish, won't smile, clearly isn't having a good time. I tried to talk to her, get to know her, tried to tell her about my friend and how great he is. She acts like I'm not there. Might as well have been the wallpaper. A month later, I'm on a date and we run into them. Remember, I'm also on a date with a man. As they're leaving, they come over to say hello. She seems equally unhappy to be alive. I introduce my dude, the three of us chat for a minute while she stands there. I jokingly tug at his shirt in a "you old dog" kind of way, and she storms out of the restaurant. Both dudes are confused. This wasn't a flirty touch of any kind, more like a bro touch. Anyway, next day at work, I work with this guy, he comes up to me and says, "Hey, you can't do stuff like that. She's really damaged. She has jealousy issues. Doesn't trust men." I apologized profusely because I didn't realize I'd done anything wrong. I even asked my date and he was baffled as well. This friend had an emergency key to my house in case I ever got locked out. He returned it a week later, citing something about, "What if you call at 2 a.m.? But isn't that the point? Isn't that what best friends do? Help each other out in times of need? Flash forward a few months in, and he refuses to speak to me. Again, we work together, won't look me in the eye. He slowly gives up other relationships, male and female. After dating the girl for 6 months, they get engaged, now married. No idea how it's going or if he's happy. I ended up moving and haven't spoken to him since. Makes me really sad to see people give up who they are for a relationship. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. He started attending college at 26, which isn't strange at all, but he insisted on living in the dorms for 3 years. It's not like we're a college town with expensive, far away, or crappy off-campus housing. He just liked the ego boost of being around kids 8+ years younger than him. My friend was 19 when they started dating. Another thing was that he was a full-time stand-up comedian with his own YouTube channel. He mostly did open mic events at bars, but couldn't stand watching other people on stage perform if it wasn't him. He would sit and seethe when my friend told him she didn't want to leave when watching other people perform. The creepiest moment was undoubtedly when my friend asked me if my boyfriend ever watched adult flicks that also featured animals. Taken aback, I said, "Frick no," and I told her that it'd be a major deal breaker for me if she did. She said, "Oh, my boyfriend told me that every guy watches it." Thankfully, they broke up last week and I couldn't be more proud or happy for her. A bit of background, this was a good friend of ours and a previous roommate. At this point, he had moved out about 1.5 years prior and we'd only had internet contact with him since. It was a meetup of old friends when we went to visit home. This was the first time we, my wife and I, met his newest girlfriend after his previous long-term relationship ended. She wasn't so bad, kind of giggling and goofy for him, since he's a bit more serious, but fine, they seem happy. We were out for dinner and her and my wife go off to the bathroom. I thought this was odd since my wife is kind of a tomboy and doesn't do the whole girls go to the bathroom to do their makeup and gossip thing, but I find out later the friend's significant other invited her to ask her a few questions about our friend. Well, after about 20 minutes went by, I realized they weren't back yet. We were both tipsy and engaged in conversation and time got away. This was a small gathering of a few couples, and one of the other girls goes in to check on them. I come to find out my friend's SO basically had my wife cornered in the bathroom, crying in her face and demanding to know why our friend had a secret crush on my wife and why he wouldn't admit it to her. After getting the recap from my wife, she said she had no clue if the girl was going to attack her or molest her since she was apparently completely against her on the wall. Apparently, it was a mixture of my wife wanting to calm her down and also being a little afraid since she was half this girl's size, and legitimately not being able to get past her that caused the long-drawn-out issue. Luckily, the person going to check on them snapped the girl out of it and diffused the situation. Very bizarre. We've seen her one time since, not exactly on purpose, and she acts like the whole thing didn't happen. She apparently has no history of mental illness, but I have no clue beyond that. The first time we met her was at a bar. My boyfriend and I arrived early, so we found a Scrabble board on the game shelf and started playing. When my friend and his significant other got there, literally before even introducing herself, the SO looked at our board and said, "Wow, that's a lot of small words. Are you guys stupid?" My boyfriend and I were so stunned that we kind of just ignored the comment. Was she joking? Anyway, she unsurprisingly turned out to be a psychotic ultra B word. She sounds like a freaking casual too. Any real Scrabble player knows it's not about the length of the word, it's all about getting QI across and down, with that QI on a triple letter. I mean, I think under a certain context and from a certain perspective of established banter, it could be funny. But yeah, it's bold to try that with strangers. Oh boy. He showed bullying and manipulative behavior from day one, but it was fine because she loved him and she could change him. A year later, he had cheated at least once and was constantly threatening to take his own life if she let him. It was fine though, because really he loved her but didn't know how to express it. Year 2, and he controlled her Facebook and phone, and he decided who she could and couldn't talk to. It was romantic though, because he really just cared about her. Year 3, and he'd cheated at least 4 times, and he'd also pretended to take his own life and break up with her multiple times, after one of which she tried to actually take her own life. We had a whole intervention thing while she was in hospital, and she agreed to leave him. 2 weeks later, they were back together. He spent $800 on my birthday gift. How could he not love me? Oh yeah, and I can't talk to you anymore, friend, because he says I shouldn't. She's still with him, by the way. Me and my cousin grew up together like brothers. I immediately knew his girlfriend didn't like me from the looks she would give me or how blunt she was when I tried to engage her in conversation. A few months down the line, I try and arrange a meal with my cousin. I asked him to bring his girlfriend along so we can break the ice. Everything was arranged. I showed up at the restaurant and they didn't. I was stood up and they're now married and have 2 kids. I wasn't invited to his stag night or his wedding. I was, and still am, gutted. I met my wife and invited him to my stag do. He was all paid up and I couldn't wait to see him again. It was the thing I was looking forward to the most. He didn't show. Again, gutted. He and his wife showed up to my wedding and acted as if there was no problem. It was quite strange, but I didn't care, as it was just great to spend some time with the man I'd considered my brother. We kind of kept in contact via text but never met up, even though I tried to arrange it a few times. Then my son was born. I was desperate for them to meet each other and bent over backwards to meet up. I agreed to meet at a play area so his daughters could tag along and go play, and he got to meet my son, who's named after his brother who passed away. I sat there for an hour before he messaged me to say he wasn't coming. As a final attempt to salvage some kind of relationship, I invited his family to my son's christening. I got a message an hour after it had finished to say he wasn't going to make it as his wife had arranged to do something else. That was 4 years ago and I haven't heard, seen or spoken to him since. It still makes me sad, but as long as he's happy, then that's all that matters, I guess. Just to expand a little, I have tried to contact him many times, via text, phone, Facebook message, but I haven't had a response. I don't believe he's happy, but I don't know enough about his relationship to pass comment. He has cut me off and there's nothing I can do to change that. I just hope that one day we do get a chance to sit down and talk it through, just so he knows I don't hold anything against him or her. If he wants me to be a part of his life, then great. If he doesn't, then at least he knows I still love him. When he started trying to pick fights with me in order to separate me from my cousin. We were in our mid-teens, he looked 17 or 18, very clean-cut and geeky, in a boy band sort of way, you know, the sensitive one with the glasses. He was well-mannered, respectful to our mums, but he seemed predatory to me. I didn't have the best people around me growing up, so I learned to recognize potential threats early, and this guy set off all of my danger bells. Just small things like watching too closely to see how people reacted to him, and the way his smile never reached his eyes. I wasn't rude, but I didn't fawn over him either. Once he realized that I wasn't charmed by him, he started avoiding me, telling her he didn't feel comfortable around me and she'd have to see him alone. He tried bullying me anytime he saw me, while still bragging to me that he was her protector and her white knight. Found out a few months later that he was actually in his mid-20s and had a record for stalking and trying it on with underage girls. Too bad we didn't know this before he gave her herpes. My best friend started to date this girl about a year ago. She was awesome, always seemed so nice and was very fun to be around. About 3 months into the relationship and everything was going great. Then he asked her to move in with him. The day comes to move in and I go over to help her move the heavy stuff and lo and behold she shows up with a 5-year-old. When I ask who it is, she said her son. We were blown away. She had never mentioned it and never said anything about having a kid. Her Facebook had 0 pics of her kid, no one mentioned her kid. It was a big cover-up and she basically just wanted someone to support her and the kid. He noped out of that one right then and there. That kid is super duper effed. The first time I met him was at her birthday party. He shook my hand, then proceeded to try and grind on me in front of her and her family. Then when I called him out on it, everyone said I was the problem and just jealous. A year later, it turns out he'd been cheating on her continuously and had gotten 2 girls pregnant while dating with her. What a catch. It's just a shame he's not on the dating market for the rest of us. Or maybe he is, given his record of infidelity. He hated her spending time with me, snide jokes about lesbian lovers and wondering about the true nature of our relationship. The day we met finally, he told me that muff munching can't compete with a good hard hetero screwing. Then he started insisting that I was closeted and obsessed with her. My boyfriend was just a beard. Funny thing is, I was meeting this girl after 5 months. He was scary, controlling, and insecure. 4 years later, they are sadly still together. I've given up at this point. I had a friend for years. He was an old boyfriend when we were like 15 or 16. I lost touch and finally found his number shortly after I got married. We chatted for about 5 minutes on the phone, and I said I'd call back when I had more time and we could catch up. When I called back, his then-girlfriend answered the phone. She knew who I was. We were all part of the same group. She told me I was never to contact him again, told him he hated me, and she was talking because he didn't even want to talk to me. I just wanted to see how he was and tell him about my new husband. A few years after that, they broke up. She cheated. I sent him a message and found out she had done that to most of his friends and family. He was just starting to piece his life back together after she slowly secluded him. He had no clue and thought I just never called him again. When he installed some kind of app on my best friend's computer so that he could control the mouse with his phone. I think this was 2 months after I met him. 6 months into their relationship, I thought that was really messed up, but I guess, haha, it's only a joke. About a year later, he asked her to sign into Facebook to see if Facebook was working for her. Later that day, she came over worried and asked me if he could have saved her password even if she told Chrome not to save it. We kind of bounced ideas around that. No, I don't think so. I mean, unless he put a keylogger onto his computer. But that would be messed up. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. Notable favorite, after breaking up, he also tried to pose as me on Kik so he could talk to her. He used a username that was a lot like mine, so it was easily mistaken. The whole relationship was a messy, gosh darn mess. When my husband and I were helping them move, he would only speak to or answer my husband. I had an idea of how to move some stuff up the stairs, and the guy just blew me off. So I told my husband to casually mention the same idea, and poof, it was an awesome idea, so we had to try it right there and then. He always put her down and she would just take it. In the end, he broke up with her because he felt she wasn't thin or pretty enough for him. Then he'd get mad at her for trying to move on and tried to sabotage every relationship she tried to have. I ended up ending the friendship because I couldn't stand listening to her complain about how he was treating her, and she would keep going back to him. Teachers. What's the worst parent-teacher conference you've ever had? I had a student fail my class and I thought I'd been emailing with their parents throughout the semester. Turns out the parents didn't speak English and relied on their children to translate for them. Their older sibling was studying abroad, so the student was able to hide everything from the parents. Once they came home, the jig was up. The parents couldn't believe their child had lied for months, so we had a face-to-face meeting. It was so awful to see their faces crumble in shame and humiliation as their oldest child translated the meeting. I teach 7th grade, and the one that stands out to me was from my 2nd year in the classroom. Probably it sticks out in my mind because I didn't feel confident in my job yet, so this interaction I had with the family threw me for a loop. Once, I had a struggling student come in with their family, and I was so eager to talk to this family. I was hoping that we could have some kind of constructive conversation that would lead to the kid's improvement in my class. I'd pulled up their grades to explain why he had a D in my class and what he needed to work on to bring his grade up. Next thing I knew, parents started completely berating the kid, calling him stupid and lazy and telling him that he was a failure. It was horrible. Even worse, the kid was on the spectrum, so he really didn't have the kind of emotional stability to handle something like that. Heck, I don't know what 7th grader would be able to handle something like that. He started crying and his parents apologized to me, and led him out into the hallway where they continued to berate him. It was rough. I tried to smooth some things over by talking about the kid's strengths, but they just wouldn't be deterred. The kid was sitting on the ground in the hallway, just sobbing next to the lockers, and his parents left, presumably to go to conferences with more teachers. I tried to console the student, but I don't think there was much I could have done. He was just completely heartbroken. I had to tell a well-known gang leader that his son was failing my class. It actually went better than expected, but the anticipation was real. I was talking to the parent of a kindergarten student and telling her ways that she could help her child at home. She suddenly said, "Do you get paid to do this?" I said, yeah. And she said, "Well, I don't." Then she swiped all the papers off the table, stood up and walked out. I was like, okay then. My best friend's mum was told by her kindergarten or reception teacher in the UK to stop helping or encouraging her to read as she was making the other kids look bad, when in fact it was the teacher being a bit crap. She changed schools not long after. Why on earth an educator feels the need to stop a child from learning and excelling is a question that will never not boggle my mind. Not quite a parent-teacher conference, but it was after I got my first cell flip phone long ago when they were just coming out. An 8th grader stole it. My wife called the phone and the guy who answered was dumb enough to give her his name. It was a parent who was using it. The kid confesses to taking it and the parents came in. Admin confronted the parents about it, explaining that we just wanted the phone back. The parents tore into the kid for confessing he took the phone and told him his birthday was cancelled for ratting on them. I've had similar to this. Lady at my work, her phone goes missing. She then, months later, does a home visit to a family and sees her phone on the table. She picks it up and her photos are still on there. She says to the mum, "This is my phone." And mum says, "Oh my god, sorry, if I'd known it was yours, I would have made him give it back." How the frick does your 8-year-old just come home with a stolen phone and you're cool with it unless it's been swiped off someone you like? I did like the kid though, just couldn't trust him. My mother-in-law is a teacher. She had one child who basically existed to make sure my mother-in-law wouldn't be able to get through her day peacefully. Crawling on the ground all day, continuously talking, just generally distracting other kids and being uncontrollable. Mother-in-law had several talks with the kids' parents, but they obviously couldn't give a single crap. One day she lost her phone that she always kept on top of her desk. She spent hours looking for it when it occurred to her that the kid had been unusually quiet toward the end of the day. She asked my father-in-law to call her and of course the kid picks it up. My mother-in-law was furious and called the girl's parents. Her parents said that the kid had claimed that mother-in-law had let her have it for good behavior. It was all really stupid. Parent was irate because I caught her 6th grader cheating on a test. The parents said that the daughter was too stupid to cheat anyway and kept calling her dumb and an idiot. The daughter was right next to her, hearing her mother talk all this negative crap about her. Absolutely broke my heart. In tears, I told my principal. She said, "Well, there's nothing you can do about it, and if she really believes that, she's doing an incredible disservice to her daughter." I left the school the end of that year. An unintended conference when an undergrad I was teaching requested a formal meeting with me, her mother, and the dean of the college at the university. She'd received a 97% on an essay and she and her mother were both in tears, demanding that I be reprimanded and retrained for unfair grading policies. I think my mouth was agape the entire time. One time, a child peed all over the bathroom in the school. When we brought it up with a parent, they demanded to know why we didn't teach them how to properly use the bathroom. My girlfriend's mum is a teacher in a very poor, mostly racial minority area. She once had a child in 3rd grade who was on the cusp of being tested for special needs, but basically was approached as being slow but no serious biological developmental issues. This child, on one disgusting occasion, ate his own feces. Yes, ingested, on purpose, his own excrement. When brought up to the mother, the response was, "Well, he was hungry." An administrator in the room responded, "Then send him home with some crackers." Ugh, the horror. Once had a phone conference with a parent who accused me of forcing students to come to my house and build a garage for me. The parent said his son was being ostracized and punished by me for refusing to come to my house and work on my garage. The only thing I could do was laugh at him. I thought it was a prank and hung up on him. Next morning, I had to meet with my principal because the parent had called and threatened to call the local news media about my classroom if I wasn't immediately fired. The parent left screaming rants on my principal's voicemail. We listened to it a few times and got some good laughs. The parent claimed I was making the kid drive to my house during class, and if they didn't, I was failing them. But his son had an A- in the class, and the drive to my house was longer than the class period. The parent was obviously nuts, but it had to be treated as credible. So there was an investigation, and there may even be a report about it in my personal file. I've had other weird interactions with parents, but that one definitely takes the cake. Most parents are awesome and I enjoy visiting them. A very small minority will try and verbally abuse you or bully you. Kids will twist words and incidents so they don't get into trouble. Some parents can't believe their angels can do anything wrong. I don't know why they believe that. I've messed up as a kid and as a young adult. My kid is no angel either. That's not to say that teachers don't mess up and twist things either. Former teacher, first parent-teacher conference. I put a lot of time into preparing this evening as an innocent 22-year-old. I gave a 10-minute speech to about 15 family members. They didn't seem to care at all. Then I met up with each individually and they were combative. Some stunk of alcohol. One straight up yelled at me for my grading systems. It was basically the beginning of the end of my interest in teaching. Depending on what kind of training you had to go through to become a teacher in the first place, that seems like a raw deal. Hopefully it wasn't the 3 to 5 years of training that most people do. So this year I got thrown into a new teaching assignment. In year 2, the week before school started, I teach geometry, which many students hate because it requires a different type of thinking. It's almost worse with honors students because they think they should automatically know everything without trying and are shocked when they don't. Anyway, one of my geometry classes basically tried to stage a mutiny because of a test before conferences. The principal informed me that she was getting emails about the class. I was prepared for the worst and then surprised when most of my conferences were very positive, until one couple sat down and said that their students weren't learning any geometry. I explained that they were constantly distracted in class and that I was giving them new seat assignments to help them focus. Because on the day of conferences, the student in question had spent the entire class period drawing a clown when I thought she was taking notes. The mum said, "That was one incident. It doesn't explain the fact that she's not learning. Plus, is it true that you once forgot to post the answer key to a review guide and then gave the quiz the next day anyway?" She says this like it's the most damning piece of evidence in a courtroom drama. Me? Yes, it did happen once. We'd gone over the majority of the answers in class the day before. I told the students that they had time to ask questions before the quiz, and that should this ever happen again, all they need to do is send an email or leave an online comment and I'll fix it right away. It shouldn't have affected their grade at all, and even if it had, I allow test retakes and am always available after school to help. Cue the awkward silence while the mum stares at me like an angry bullfrog, presumably shocked that I didn't resign on the spot. This was the biggest flaw they could come up with in my class. I have a crazy professional and personal life and am doing my best, but kids, and often parents, will find any possible excuse to avoid confronting their struggles. I ended up chuckling with my principal about the fact that my failing to upload a document triggered parent emails to the administration after the fact when not a single parent or student bothered to contact me the day of. These are from the same parent evening. 1. Parents of a student with a name fancy enough that they may as well have been called Lord and Lady Ashcroft. They greet me with, "It's a pleasure to meet you. You aren't a C-word like all the other teachers," in very proper English. I was gobsmacked. Spoke to a colleague later who said, "Did you speak to those parents? They just sat me down, called me a C-word and left." 2. I had a student who was great at the work but swore to an extent that would make a trooper blush. "Hi, how are you doing today?" for instance, would come out as, "Frickin' hi! Fricking how the frick are you fricking doing, you fricking gobcrap?" Suffice to say, I brought this up with his mother, who turned to him and said, "You fricking what? Fricking heck! We fricking talked about this, you fricking eggplant." I stopped policing his language after that. There wasn't any fricking point. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I mean, it wasn't exactly a bad conference, but one time the mother of a 6-year-old second grader was pushing for her son to skip second grade and go to third grade. I tried pointing out that even though his reading and math skills were excellent, advancing him further would create a gap in his knowledge about science and social studies, not to mention the fact that he's very immature and socially sticks out. Finally, I turned to both the mother and father and asked when he's a 15-year-old senior in high school what 18-year-old woman is going to want to go to the prom with him. Then Dad was like, "Hold up. I'm a school psychologist, not a teacher, but we still have lots of parenting conferences. Worst one, spent a good half hour explaining that I was diagnosing her son with autism and why. Everyone agrees, including the parent, and we move on to developing his IEP. 20 minutes into this, and we're talking about his behavior plan, and she asks me, "I'm wondering, do you think he might have autism?" I do want to say that 98% of parents I work with are kind to school staff and very invested in their children. The stories in this conversation are the exceptions and not the norm. One of my friends just moved from the 4th grade special ed to the 1st grade. The kids are smaller, cuter, and can't draw blood or bruise her as much, which is a plus. The drawback that she's just now realizing is the parents. Older kids' parents have gotten used to the fact that their kid isn't normal and needs extra attention. Parents of the really young kids are still in the denial stage. Half of them still can't accept that their kids should be in special ed and are constantly fighting to get them out. The one where a parent told me it was unreasonable to expect my sophomore US history students to write a 5-paragraph essay. She claimed she had expertise as she used to be an English teacher. Honestly though, I've been very lucky in my career to have never had a seriously bad parent-teacher conference. In my sophomore history class, we had several essays, maybe 3 to 4 a semester. It's wild that she, as an English teacher, would say that was weird. Yep, when she made her claim, it was all I could do to not say, "I see why you used to be an English teacher." This is the same conference where she asked, "Isn't this your first year teaching?" It wasn't. Generally speaking, the parents who see their children as an extension of themselves are the worst to conference with. The parents feel personally attacked when their child has a minor setback and can't imagine their child being anything less than they are. These people are like the worst exaggeration of game players who interpret failure as a personal attack. No, I'm not targeting you, Trevor. You rolled a 4 on the dice when you needed a 12. I had a parent-teacher conference where I basically got called a racist. The father was like, "Can't you see my son isn't like other kids? Give him the benefit of the doubt," heavily indicating his race. This was after his son cheated on a test. The best part was the father was vice principal at another school, but his son went to our expensive private school because he didn't want him in the public school he worked at. The kid eventually confessed, and to be 100% transparent, my school is incredibly diverse. He was far from the only kid there who was his race. Admin was super supportive. They ended up fudging his grade to please the parents after I gave him the 0. They wanted me to do it, but I refused. I told admin they can do whatever they want with the gradebook, but I'm not touching it. I had an experience like that once, was teaching at the majority-minority school where the staff wasn't as representative, only 40% minority teachers. As a result, it was a frequent and not always unwarranted occurrence for a teacher to get labeled as a racist, or at the very least, not treating students equally. I was sitting in a meeting between parents and all of the students' teachers, as well as the principal, to discuss gross behavior concerns we were having with this child. Being really inappropriate with peers, violent outbursts, etc. Parents claimed it was all because of his racist math teacher. The entire time, student is talking in Amharic to his parents and not responding to any English questions we pose. This goes on for about 30 minutes until our math teacher speaks up in what I was later told was perfect Amharic, explaining the situation to the child's parents in their native language. Turns out our white math teacher was a South African orphan that ended up raised in Ethiopia and went to school in the same town as the child's father, albeit 15 years earlier. This whole chain of events pretty much stunned the parents silent, and the meeting wrapped up a few short minutes later. When asked about what he'd said, the teacher told us that he'd reminded the parents that were their son still in Ethiopia, he would have been hauled in front of the school at lunchtime and paddled in front of his entire class for what he'd done, that a bell would have been rung 50 times, once for each time he was paddled, just as he, as well as the kid's parents, had no doubt experienced as a child, and that the child was lucky they were in a part of the world that had gotten rid of such practices. But that child's behavior was utterly inexcusable, and how dare they suggest that the color of their skin somehow makes it okay for their child to disrespect women and commit violence. Unfortunately, it had little effect, and 3 years later the student was in jail for selling substances to minors, less than 6 months after being expelled for intentionally starting a fire in the art room. I was a first-year special education teacher last year. I had little support that year and learned as I went, but especially since I was dealing with health problems at the same time, it wasn't a great year for me or the students. I should add that the majority of my students were bilingual, English and Spanish, and many of the parents didn't speak English at all. My Spanish is advanced beginner at best, so I became well acquainted with a few of the interpreters that worked in translation. There are a few that stick out in my mind. The worst was when the interpreter was a no-show during an ARD meeting. AP requested that I reschedule the meeting. The parent was understanding, but I was so stressed out and embarrassed that the parent came all the way to the school just for the meeting to not happen at all, with the due date for that child's ARD soon approaching. Once everyone had left the room and was out of earshot, I broke down crying. Second to that meeting with a parent who was scared to death that her child had autism. I worked with him more throughout the first semester, and I did begin to notice some possible and very subtle signs of autism, but he didn't have behavioral problems aside from needing regular redirection, and he got along well with his peers, so I wasn't too worried about him from a social standpoint. Academically, he was struggling, but we were working on that. The parent was in tears, and nothing I said could calm her down. What made this especially uncomfortable for me was that I'd been finally diagnosed with autism not even a year prior after suspecting for so long in my life. I wanted so much to assure her that even if her son did have autism, it wasn't the end of the world. It didn't change who he was as a person, but I wasn't exactly sure how. The last one was where the parent ended up being a no-show for an ARD. Mum was apparently pregnant and ended up going to the hospital, which I can understand, but no one could get in touch with any relative to find out what was going on until after the scheduled time. This particular parent had a history of being rather uncaring. The daughter was having some major behavioral issues, ended up getting suspended twice that year, and when her general educational teachers talked to Mum after school, her response was, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" I had a student as a sophomore in a co-teach special ed class. The student was borderline ID, he passed the heavily modified class, Students with these types of educational accommodations and modifications aren't able to attend a 4-year university. They can attend community colleges. The next year, he was in my class again. I contacted his case manager, and the parents told her they wanted to put him in regular classes so that he would be eligible to attend a 4-year university. We documented his work and scheduled a parent conference. We politely told the parent that their son was bombing the class because he was out of his depth, and we wanted to do the right thing and move him into co-teach classes where he could be successful. The parents argued with us that he was doing well in his other classes. He was passing with a 70 in every one. This is because his teachers didn't want to crush the kid, and grade protected him. His parents continued with, "We both are college graduates and our son will be too." This was ego. We want to provide the student with the proper levels of support. Finally, I was exasperated and called the student in. We spent 2 weeks on Islam and religion, so I asked the student to define Islam. The response was, "An island in the Pacific." Yeah, they still argued with us. Heck, I'd have given him a partial credit for the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, or any other body of water in that region. We eventually got him in the right classes and he graduated with his class. Teachers want what's best for your child because they are our students and we want them to succeed. That's true. I remember having a teacher who did not like me, and I did not like them, and I downright hated their subject. But damn, they persisted. Kept me in after class, and I probably wouldn't have passed math without them. Most of them want what's best for your kids, guys. Parent accused me of singling out her child, talking to them differently versus the other 25 kids, sitting around and doing bugger all except talking about my romantic life, plus more wild, hurtful accusations. Also accused me of trying to be friends with students, all of which couldn't be further from the truth. I pointed out that I have a TA with me who could dispute those claims. Also legal documents backing up how her child was lying, documenting all the inappropriate behavior and harassment her child had directed at me, with times and dates. The parent continued to reiterate that she believed I was a liar and tore verbal shreds off me for almost 2 hours, no matter how much I repeatedly defended myself. I've never felt so disrespected and belittled my entire life. I was teaching 8th grade. I called a parent due to having their child repeatedly disrupt my class. I don't like to kick students out because to me that means that they've won. They aren't learning anything if they aren't in my room. I also operate on the idea that even if they're tuning me out, they may read one of my posters and retain something. Anyway, I called a parent explaining that their child was disruptive, blurting out, passing notes, moving to different seats, texting, saying rude things, etc. And the parent said, "I bet my child isn't the only one." I responded, "You're right, but I'm talking to you about your child, not someone else's. Isn't it your job to correct their classroom behavior?" I responded, "I've explained the steps I've taken to support your child in the classroom. What do you want me to do about it?" I responded, "Well, I'm not old enough to be your child's parent, so I would appreciate parental support." This is what I said instead of, "Parent your fricking child." There was one kid in one of my classes who had seizure disorder. So one day we had a guest in the room and he wasn't doing any of his work. Then when she asked why, he said, "I have seizure disorder, so I don't have to do any work." They then told me, the student teacher, and then I told my mentor teacher. His family and I had a parent-teacher conference already scheduled that day, so when I brought it up, the dad goes, "My son didn't say that, the guest was making that up." Yes, the guest came into the room, figured out that your kid had seizure disorder, and then told me your kid said that just for fun. Okay. Probably the time when both the dad and the son were high as frick. Both were nodding off in the meeting. The mother looked like she was on the verge of tears. Poor kid never stood a chance. What were some wild things you saw happen at Olive Garden, or another restaurant with an all-you-can-eat deal? Oh, this is something I can actually answer. I was working a lunch shift and had a table of 3 come in, all mid-30s women. I bought the initial bread basket out, turned around, and they were gone. Okay, y'all were hungry, that's normal. Bought a new basket out and it happened again. Kept bringing baskets of bread, had to be 7 or 8. At this point we're talking about 30 breadsticks and the food hasn't even hit the table yet. I start watching and they're putting the bread in their purses, just filling them up. Manager asks them politely to stop and that was that. They weren't thrilled. Wasn't putting breadsticks in your purse a meme at some point? I've never understood why a purse. So I'm a dude and I don't own one, nor have I ever looked up how much money they are. But aren't purses super expensive? Like, I get you can put a bag in there, but if that bag fails, you'll have a greasy, cheesy, garlicky mess in your purse. Are those maybe $6 worth of breadsticks really worth it? Don't get me wrong, I love Olive Garden breadsticks, but still, man. I was a waiter. I had a couple of middle-aged ladies there from lunch until early dinner, roughly between 1 and 6 p.m., with the unlimited soup and salad, water to drink, of course. Manager said something to the effect of, if they want to sit there that long, let them. After lunch, I gave the table to the waitress relieving me. I told her to keep the tip. We both knew they weren't going to tip. The thing I found amazing was their casual, marathon-style conversation. Slow, steady, long pauses, and comfortable silences. They both knew what they were doing. When I left around 3 or 4, they weren't even winded. I worked at Olive Garden years ago. Not entirely related, but I had a middle-aged, overweight woman always order a pint of Alfredo sauce as soon as she sat down. They sell it in quantities like that for takeout orders, and she would slop it down with about 6 breadsticks before she ordered appetizers. We're talking 2,000 plus calories before appetizers and dinner. I still remember her ordering, and her mouth opening and closing like a gooey, heavy cream sarlacc pit. "You have just ruined Alfredo sauce for me. I'm hungover. This just made me gag. Ugh." Used to rent a room from someone who ordered a never-ending pasta pass, and they were accidentally sent too. Rent paid for itself that month. How much is a pass? If I remember correctly, it was $100. A couple of months ago, there was a couple who would come in literally every night and eat dinner. I was still new to that Olive Garden location, so I didn't really know who they were, and I thought they were some rich college kids who blew their parents' money on average pasta. I asked around, and apparently they had a pass. It explained the frequency, but I still can't fathom how anyone wants to eat Olive Garden that much, even if it's basically free. Note that when I said literally, I meant literally. Every single night they came in and got food for at least a month. Oh, the person who wrote that last part lived a very different poor student life to the one I did, if they even lived one at all. Compared to my 2 portions of porridge a day that I had in my dorms, if I had free food at a restaurant for a month, I would be in one of these stories. I saw her stealing the breadsticks, putting them in her big purse when I wasn't near, and kept asking for more. I can't blame her, they're delicious. "Were you my server in New Hampshire like 10 years ago? I got so busted doing that. Haven't shown my face in an Olive Garden since." Also New Hampshire here, Manchester. My grandmother always stuffs her purse with bread. You guys know you can just ask for some to go, right? You usually get at least 5 or 6 to take. You ask for some to go on top of putting them in your purse. Maximize your take home. I went with a buddy 2 weeks ago with their pasta pass, and we could hardly finish 1 bowl each. But our waitress kept asking if we'd like more, wink wink. So we got another helping of pasta straight into a to-go box. And then she basically said, "You're my only table right now, so if you guys want more food, just keep ordering and I'll bring you more." We took home 3 bags full of Olive Garden and only stopped because we didn't want her to get into trouble. Needless to say, she got a nice tip because we were meal prepped for the week. The Wendy's in the town I grew up in would do this if you went through the drive-thru at 12:50. Closed at 1 a.m. Basically, anything left over they'd have to throw out would end up in your bag. I'd buy like one thing off the dollar menu and get a damn feast. I missed that place, and being at a point in my life where a meal at 1 a.m. was reasonable. A friend of mine worked at Wendy's back in college. He would show up at our apartment with 3 or 4 bags of food every few days. He'd cook it right around 12:30 a.m. and then leave work and show up. We were all so high when he came over, it was like he was sent from burger heaven. It was 11:45 p.m. and we'd closed at 11 p.m. They showed up at 10:55 and complained they felt rushed. Meal was comped and they left no tip. I hated serving. Another story I just remembered, we had a guy who had a pasta pass, pay $100 and get all the pasta you could ever want in a month, and would come in and eat and then proceed to either wait until he had to poop or made himself spew to make room for more pasta. He usually came alone with the same crusty outfit and would tell everyone how much money he's saving by coming every day and eating pasta. Oh, I've got plenty more. For example, I had a family who we call the Alfredo family. Literally the worst people I've ever met. Came once a week and complained about literally everything. Kids would run around the entire restaurant and steal tips from other tables that were left out. They got the charming nickname because no matter how much Alfredo sauce you put on their pasta, it was never enough. I'm talking 10 to 15 scoops worth of sauce each. They literally used every excuse to get comped food and gift cards. The drink was either too flat or the food too dry. We were the worst Olive Garden ever apparently, which made no sense since they came once a week. They must have gotten thousands of dollars in comps and free gift cards. It was terrible. They even tried to lure out one of the managers to the parking lot to assault her because she was seriously over their crap. Guess what they got for pulling that stunt? A $200 gift card. My girlfriend says only a manager can cut someone off from the unlimited food deals, and the only time that they cut someone off was during the unlimited pasta event. He ate so much he couldn't eat anymore, but he refused to leave because he wanted to wait until he could eat more. There was a place called It's with a buffet, movie room, cartoon room, sports bar room, and arcade. It had $2 Tuesdays, $2 buffet. Many people would come for lunch, watch movies until dinner, and eat again. I don't work at Olive Garden, I'm just going to share a story that happened there last week. It was my birthday on the 22nd, and a friend wanted to take me because she had a gift card. She said I could have it, but I asked her to go with me to use it. There's only one Olive Garden in town, and it's always a madhouse, but we went anyways because of the gift card. Got there, waited maybe 20 minutes for a table, and all was going well. We'd just put in a drink order, and we looked over the menu when suddenly, bam, power went out. Floodlights immediately kicked in, so it wasn't dark. So we waited, hadn't even received our drinks yet. The waiter brings us waters. Soda couldn't be bought because something about the machine not working with the power out. No big deal. We're asked to see what the situation is, but we can leave if we'd like. Most people stay hoping for it to come back on, us included. 5-minute pass and the waiter brings out breadsticks and salad, so we're happy to snack while we wait. 10 minutes later, we're told someone ran their car into the transformer so power wouldn't be coming back on. Good news was all soups, salads and breadsticks had to be given out because they couldn't stay out, and it was all free. Our waiter even managed to snag a cheesecake slice for me because it was my birthday, which was also free. He received a large tip that night. A 30% tip on a free meal. Reminds me of how my brother and I were craving Olive Garden, so we went to our local one, but the power was out. That's okay, we drove 5 miles to the next nearest one, got in the door, said one word to the hostess, and the power went out there too. So like good boys, we just found the next closest one. Boy, those breadsticks taste so much better when you have to fight nature for them. Not Olive Garden, but similar. My skinny as frick uncle once got the all-you-can-eat shrimp at Sizzler, and was eventually told he couldn't have any more. The man had easily eaten over 100 shrimp. It was pretty funny. Mrs. Simpson, what did you and your husband do after you were ejected from the restaurant? Oh, we pretty much went straight home. Mrs. Simpson, you're under oath. We drove around until 3 a.m. looking for another all-you-can-eat fish restaurant. And when you couldn't find one, we went fishing. Does that sound like a man who had all he could eat? I'm sorry, but that's all I could think of during that story. I'll admit that I was also thinking of this scene when I read the original story, and that last commenter is responsible for you all having to suffer through my Marge Simpson impression. There are more non-cartoon comments on the incident to follow. Your uncle was deceived. 300 shrimp is nothing. Former Red Lobster server here, the record for endless shrimp was 35 refills, roughly 10 shrimp per refill, plus the 30 shrimp in the original order. All scampi. 380 shrimp. The dude dipped them in water first to remove the scampi butter. It was disgusting. The water thing makes me think that he was maybe a competitive eater, probably training. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm originally from Eastern Europe, but I worked at Olive Garden in South Carolina during my work and travel trip. It was my first time in the US, and the whole experience was great, but also often awkward. It was weird from the start. People who hired me were very surprised with me showing them an actual work permit. Oh yeah, we totally needed that. There wasn't many foreigners in that part of South Carolina, so the manager decided that it would work great if I pretend to be Italian, to make their authentic Italian dining experience even more authentic. I really needed that job, so I rolled with it, welcoming guests with my Eastern European/fake Italian accent, and people loved it. Oh, I love your accent. It's from northern Italy, right? Yeah, about 2,000 miles northeast of Rome, mate. South Carolinians were some of the kindest and nicest people I ever met, although often confused with geography. I'm actually from Poland, I admitted to the great older guy. Poland? Ha! My father liberated Amsterdam. I got great tips, but this one time, one family liked me so much that the father went back to his house and came back with actual Polish bills. He left me 1,000 Polish zlotys and patted my shoulder as he was leaving. Good luck, kid. He had no way of knowing that the bills he left were communist currency with present total value of precisely 3 cents. Anyway, the worst kind of clients were the ones who just wanted soup and salad and unlimited breadsticks. I'm not sure how it works now, but when this was all unlimited, you had to run around refilling everything, knowing that 3 hours of this will bring you a $2 tip. Hey, it's 20%. 40-year-old ladies were the worst. I preferred a table of cartel members who spoke no English than a group of 4 ladies, with at least one named Karen. Still, super salad people were nothing in comparison to yearly Olive Garden Armageddon, which was the unlimited pasta bowl deal. It was something like $9.99 per bowl with unlimited refills of pasta, sauces, meatballs, and sausage. I had one guy who ate 13 bowls. That's almost 4 kilos of pasta. Still, the only time you could cut somebody off those refills was when they hoarded them in hidden boxes. And that happened a lot. I had a guy who was ordering breadsticks refills every 4 minutes and putting them in his backpack. He said it was for his hiking trip. Stoners often got stuck on eating breadsticks, and once their main meals arrived, they realized they're about to explode and politely asked for boxes. Not Olive Garden, but I got cut off from Denny's unlimited pancakes after 10 flapjacks. I was less than 120 pounds at the time. The cook was surprised when he came out to cut me off. Are you talking 10 pancakes or 10 plates? Right, like 10 pancakes is doable, I'd feel ill, but I could get it in there. It's not an absolutely insane amount. Oh, that depends on what kind of pancake. After 10 Dutch pancakes, I would just keel over and die. My brother once said he had over 30 pancakes at IHOP during their unlimited pancakes. He said after 25 it hurt, but he wanted to get to 30, so he pushed on. I'm still sad I wasn't there to see it. The manager told me I'd reached my limit in unlimited pasta bowls. Apparently unlimited means 9 pasta bowls. Wow, the most I've seen was 6. I wasn't serving the guy, but I did run a lot of the bowls. He didn't even finish many, it just seemed like he wanted to do a sampler of all the classics. If you get the most expensive one, we let you get refills of the cheaper ones if you want. I mentioned the guy to our manager that night, and all she said was, "Good for him, getting his money's worth." I worked at Old Country Buffet in the early 90s. We never cut anyone off, but here are a few things I recall. Elderly couples coming in for breakfast and staying all day. They were usually nice, so we didn't mind. Eventually, the restaurant made you pay again if you stayed after breakfast or lunch. One person dumped the entire pan of shrimp onto their plate. Whole plates of fried chicken piled high, just vanishing into thin air, not even bones remaining. Ziploc bags are a wonderful thing. Whole other plates of fried chicken piled high, left sitting to be thrown away with not one bite taken. The strawberry shortcake bar never failed to have people vomiting. No, you shouldn't put that much whipped cream inside of you. My favorite story involved a woman pulling a manager aside and saying, "I don't want to cause a scene, but I found this fish hook in the seafood salad." And the manager replying, "I don't want to cause a scene either, but there ain't nothing in that seafood salad that was caught with a hook." Yum yum. I mean, if it's that cheap, it has to be both non-hazardous and ethically caught, right? Honestly, there is probably a certain price bracket below which complaining is meaningless. I'm always afraid they're going to kick me out for eating too much, 3 or 4 baskets of breadsticks maybe. On the soup note, anyone else ever wonder how far you can push the "say when" on cheese grating? Sometimes I have guests who are embarrassed or feign embarrassment about the amount of cheese they like. I always say the same thing. Every moment I grate cheese is a moment I'm not carrying a 30-plus pound tray of food or dirty dishes. This isn't a workout for me, it's a rest break. You say when you're good and ready, lady. I've gone through an entire block before, plus some. I'll go back and get more if you really want me to. Also, my arm never hurts. I do this 40 hours a week. You think your one bowl of soup with more than average cheese is going to make my arm hurt? I worked at Olive Garden for 4 years. It's a chain, so you never cut people off, but good lord, I dished out some soup, salad, bread, and pasta. I had an obese 25-ish male regular who had Asperger's and came in with his enabling mother every week. Always the worst tip of the week, but they always requested me. It was the same thing every week for the guy: a tour of Italy, lasagna, chick parm, and fat alfredo, and 4 bowls of pasta fagioli with a block of grated cheese in each bowl. Not to mention the 2 blocks on the tour of Italy. The mother would just smile the whole time and call me sweetie as her son gorged himself to death. Those 4 years there were hell. Plenty more stories of a similar nature. Worked TGI Fridays for endless apps. Watched a guy eat 12 orders of pot stickers. That's 72 pot stickers. He also drank 14 refills of Diet Coke with no ice. That's 308 ounces of Diet Coke. This all happened in about 90 minutes. Then he asked for the dessert menu. I was both disgusted and impressed. Only got to cut one person off because her B-word butt decided to complain long enough about the zuppa to get her whole meal comped. Choked down a bowl of gnocchi and then tried to eat more zuppa. Then she had the audacity to ask me to take a bowl home. Big ol' nope. Was tipped with a Jesus pamphlet. When I was a teenager, my uncle was a youth pastor and invited me to an event. After we went to a local Friendlies, 15 people in total. He left a business card for his church as his tip. I was so teed off. My mum had given me a 20 for food, so before I left I stopped my waiter and handed it to him. I went in there a lot and he was a nice guy and a good waiter, and it was all I had. I would have left more if I could, and I told him that, and what he could expect to find on the table. He thanked me. I was like 15 and knew better than to not tip, especially for a large party. Being Christian means helping others, and that includes tipping your waitstaff. Worked in various Olive Gardens off and on over the course of a decade, ranging from Houston to Boston. Even was a trainer for a bit before deciding to go to law school. Never had to cut someone off for unlimited breadsticks or salad. Never had to cut someone off for unlimited pasta bowls. A guy I served at the Olive Garden in Greenville, South Carolina, ate his original bowl plus 15 refills. He was determined to eat each one of the pasta and sauce combinations. He kept me wildly busy, running pasta and bread out to him all evening. His two friends had to help him walk out of the restaurant. At the time, a big bowl of pasta was 8 ounces and the refills were 4 ounces. He ate 4.25 pounds of pasta, plus a lot of sauce, and had the meat add-on many of them. I'm guessing he cleared out more than 6 pounds of food over the course of that meal. He tipped $4. On the other hand, I've been in a restaurant where we've run out of breadsticks. Normally, we were pretty free with the breadsticks. You have a set amount you're supposed to bring out, number of guests at a table plus 1, but a lot of the servers just load up their tables at the beginning to minimize the amount of running they have to do. On the handful of days where we ran out, the managers were watching breadstick load up like hawks. We couldn't eat any of them ourselves either. Normally, it's the one thing you can eat while on shift. Anyway, people absolutely lose their crap if they show up and find out we don't have breadsticks. The hosts were warning everyone who came through the door, and people were still mad. Folks would yell at them, then leave. The few who stayed were nice, but kept talking about how it didn't feel like an Olive Garden meal without the breadsticks. The worst were the tables that were already seated when we ran out. I had one who kept asking me why I was being so stingy, and when I explained why I'd only bought out enough for each person instead of a huge load up, like she'd asked for, she screamed for the manager. The manager explained that she had, in fact, gotten the last basket of breadsticks in the restaurant. The lady looked apoplectic. How the frick does an Olive Garden run out of breadsticks? Honestly, I feel you, lady, but it was 2 days after Mother's Day and the truck was due in 3 hours. The manager's orders had fallen short by less than 0.5%. This lady demanded that everything be comped. While my managers were normally the kind who would do this immediately, this one refused. Either way, I got $0 on that table, and most of the other tables were similarly cranky and low tipping. Yeah, that's an everybody loses hospitality situation if I've ever heard one. Also, I've said this before in another restaurant stories video, but screw working Mother's Day. Not worth it. When we were in high school, a bunch of friends went to an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. After gorging on many plates, one of my friends who was legendary for his eating prowess went for dessert. He took a whole banana cream pie. A manager came over and berated him for being wasteful. There were some vague threats of making him pay extra if he didn't finish the pie. The friend proceeded to eat the whole pie. The manager told him to never come back. My mum got kicked out of an all-you-can-eat sushi place once. She was pretty mad. The manager somehow didn't think a small Filipino from Hawaii could eat that much. He's obviously never met anyone remotely Filipino. This would be a fun prank to play on an Olive Garden if you were triplets. Just sneak in one at a time and keep ordering a crap ton of salad and breadsticks. The guy just put away baskets and baskets. I don't understand. When I was a flight attendant, I used to hate serving first class because the people were grumpy. On the night flights, we didn't have great food in first class because most people were sleeping and the food is expensive, etc. One night, I only had one gentleman awake in the first class section and he wanted the meal. Turns out the meal that night was just some sad pesto pasta and a soft breadstick, which I served to him. The man grumpily goes, "What is this, Olive Garden?" And without thinking, I said in a weird Italian accent, "When you're here, your family." And he just looked at me and sort of smirked. Still one of my proudest moments. Sort of related, this customer came in and asked my coworker, who was new at the time, if they could have a box of chocolates, like the 15-pound box that we get off the truck. I was in the kitchen and saw her walking out with the box. I asked her what she was doing and she said she was giving the customer what they asked for. I quickly took that box and told them both no. It's crazy what some people have the nerve to ask for. My buddy and I went to Olive Garden damn near 30 years ago. We're looking up at the menu trying to figure out what we're going to order and the waitress walks up. "Welcome to Olive Garden, blah blah blah." I forget the spiel. "With your entree you can get unlimited salad or soup," or something to that effect. "Oh, what kind of soup do you have?" my buddy inquires. "Well, you can get either the soup or the salad," she clarifies. "I understand, but what kind of soup do you have?" he asks again. "Entries come with either soup or salad," she asserts a little testily. My buddy kind of glances over at me like, am I having a stroke? I look up at the waitress and confidently ask, "Okay, so what kind of soup do you have?" "You can get minestrone, or our daily special is the potato cream soup." "I'll just have the salad, thanks," I say as my buddy facepalms and starts giggling. Even 30 years later, anytime I see him, I always ask, "What kind of soup do you have?" What did you think you were into in the bedroom until you tried it? Going down on a guy. I've practiced with toys and can do it like a champ on my own, but as soon as he starts vigorously face-fricking me, like I always thought I'd like, it's like 3 thrusts and my gag reflex goes, nope, nope, nope. Doing the deed in front of a bunch of people. My ex and I were with 2 friends at a bar, and it was almost last call. I wasn't ready to call it a night, and being drunk, I jokingly threw out the idea of going to this swingers club that I'd heard of. My girlfriend and her friends were surprisingly into the idea. So we go to this club and I thought it would be a lot of couples. Ended up being about 60 dudes, 2 or 3 girls, and my girlfriend and her friends, and myself. The club was actually pretty freaking cool. My girlfriend and I went in a private room and went at it, then we went to a room with a ton of windows. Literally every person in the club watched my girlfriend and I go at it, along with her friends just sitting and watching. I thought it was weird as frick and kind of gross, but my girlfriend and her friends were really into it and she always asked to go back. Pretty much anything that I've seen in the special interests section of the adult flick store. I realized that I'm actually a pretty vanilla guy who just really enjoys watching weird crap once in a while. I thought I had a thing for whips. I enjoyed a whipping without a safe word and I regretted it right away. Never do anything like that without a safe word. Also, if you're trying to come up with one, what my wife and I use is a reference to a meme that we can't think about without laughing. 10 out of 10, ends things pretty well without being a total bummer. Kind of like this, I think I'm not into extreme spontaneous fun or doing the deed while asleep. My girlfriend woke me in the middle of the night because she wanted to do the deed. I had to work overtime the whole week, it was a Wednesday and all I wanted was going back to dreamland. I said yes and she climbed on top of me. I fell asleep while doing it, but seemed to have stayed hard. The next morning the whole bed was a mess, including her and me, and she slept like a stone. We had bruises and were covered in sticky stuff. I felt like Jim Carrey in Me, Myself and Irene. Completely dehydrated and everything hurt. I have no memory of anything that happened. Later that day my girlfriend was the happiest and kindest person in the whole world and smiled the whole week. I wish I knew what happened that night. And no, it wasn't the unspeakable act. She had my blessing to proceed in general. When I asked her, she said she used me to feel free and powerful and then she smiled. She jokes that I'm better in my sleep than her 2 exes were awake. So, no details. That is one of the strangest and most unique ones that I've read so far, and I have so many questions. Too bad that it doesn't actually sound like fun for the guy. Getting choked out. I'm a guy. I somehow thought that busting a nut while on the verge of passing out would lead to a military-grade explosion. My girlfriend was skeptical but humored me. Long story short, getting choked out ain't it, chief. I always thought I'd enjoy guys being more dominant and forceful until when I was in my teens I was sitting in an overgrown riverbank, facing forward with my boyfriend sitting behind me, his legs either side of mine. Suddenly he decided to choke me from behind without asking, and when I freaked his excuse was that he wanted to test if I was into that kind of thing. If that hadn't happened I might have enjoyed it in a consensual manner, but that one experience was so terrifying I'd never be down for trying it again under any circumstances. I thought that I was into girls that scratched and bit you. I mean, I'm still into girls that bite, but I was dating a girl in high school and she was big into scratching. I really should have seen the signs that she wasn't going to be gentle. She was just this tiny, cute girl. I was a half-foot taller, bigger, and tough. No way she could hurt me, right? Nope, dead wrong. I like to think I have a pretty high pain threshold, but she enjoyed hurting me. She had scratched me up hard when we were making out. She'd get carried away, and I didn't want to seem like a wuss, so I didn't say anything about it. My back looked like I'd been attacked by a raccoon. I got carried away once. I knew I was scratching him, but nothing serious. Or so I thought. When we were finished, he sat at the edge of the bed, and I saw his back. Dear Lord, it was completely scratched and red. How did I even reach all those spots? I was surprised and blurted out, "Oh God, you're back!" But he just shrugged and said, "Yeah, I figured." Pegging. I thought I was super into it, and my ex loved it when I played with his butt anyway, just grabbing it, nothing inside, so he bought me what we'll call a frontal attachment. Well, I wanted to warm him up first so I didn't tear his butt apart, but the second I spread his cheeks, I got a whiff of his butt and almost spewed all over him. Doing the deed in the shower. I slipped and made us both fall. The water washes out the lubricant fluids too, isn't that nice?
I'd love to see the opposite quote. What didn't you think you were into until you tried it?
Female here, riding my male partner like a real champ. It felt amazing, I was feeling a little extra hot and I told him to slap me across the face. He did, and I instantly burst into tears. I had a girl kind of start going down on me, then she bit the side of my stomach, hard, like she was going to try and taste my liver. Shriveled up like a sack of dimes and shoved her off. Trying this kind of thing without discussion is bad practice, but pain is especially bad. Swinging and cucking. Trying to give some guy's wife the dipstick while he watches in the corner feeding the geese is a lot more stress-inducing than pleasurable.
Feeding the geese? How have I never heard this one before?
I would like to thank Urban Dictionary for helping me understand 80% of these posts. Having a girl grind on me. My member doesn't bend that many angles very comfortably, thank you. Standing and carrying the person while doing the deed. I could do it and I'm in pretty good shape, but I wouldn't exactly say it was enjoyable for either of us. I still want to try Amazon, but I think I'd rather just have cowgirl. I haven't seen open relationships posted yet, but that was a humbling experience. My ex and I decided to explore a bit and set up some profiles on Plenty of Fish and FetLife. I figured since we were both looking for hookup partners, we'd match and find a couple that would be compatible. Fricking nope. Like 3 minutes after our profiles went up, there was an eggplant explosion in her email inbox. It was like watching Niagara Falls, just with non-stop wang pictures. I'm not gay, but some of those dudes were chiseled and cute as frick. Like even I knew I was outclassed. I had like 2 messages and none turned into anything. We broke up shortly afterwards, compatibility being an issue. Being tied up. I like it when my partner is tied, but I can't be. Just not as much of a turn-on as I thought it would be. For some reason, foot stimulation always seemed hot, but in all my experiences none of them were good, and the risk of accidentally being kicked in the balls stressed me out. I thought I had a foot thing until I actually tried playing with my girlfriend's feet. Turns out I just like how pretty feet look, from a distance.
This is how I feel about people in general.
Same. I'm gay, but I really appreciate female beauty. That's why I was sure I was bisexual until I was doing the deed with this beautiful girl, thinking about guys trying to finish. Gotta appreciate your dedication to the job that you had already begun there, mate. One time, years ago, I was doing the deed with a friend and he was close to finishing and he asked if he could call me mummy. The guy was full on inside of me. I wasn't going to say no even though I wasn't into it, so I played along to get the job done. In the 5 years since then, it has been this nagging thought in the back of my head that I want someone to call me mummy. I'm so embarrassed by it that I've never even brought it up, even though we do plenty of new, interesting stuff and it would totally be okay to ask. Earlier this year, I finally told my partner and went immediately bright red. He was into it and played along with enthusiasm, and I gotta tell you, I'm still not into it. I think it just got stuck in my head because it was so naughty and taboo, but in real life, it's just not hot. Since then, I've shoved the cat back into the bag and we've sworn never to discuss it again. I still have that little voice in my head saying to be a good boy and finish in mummy's hoo-ha, but now I just ignore it. Burning. I had an ex who was really into burning with candle wax. Not the massage candles, legit candle wax. Made a huge mess and burned a lot. I was fine with this and even had a lot of fun. The problem was, she was a sadomasochist who loved causing pain. I'm okay with this, but it led to one time where she poured candle wax over me while I was tied up. I have chest hair. This was all well and good at the time, and I didn't even mind that my hair would have to be ripped out later. In her excitement, she also decided it would be appropriate to put a freshly snuffed match against my frenulum. I would avoid this, and I do not recommend it. Since then, I'm not enticed or aroused by candle wax anymore. Wait, frenulum as in on your pee-pee? Yes, the little fleshy bridge that connects the underside of the head to the shaft. Jesus fricking Christ! What in the crispy Kentucky Fried Frick? Ice cream. She got me nice and hard and then laid out scoops of ice cream around my tower of power. Froze my eggplant and then started melting down my butt crack, and pretty soon my butt was sticky. She tried her best to lick everything up, but that didn't make things any better. Worse was that it got on the bedsheets and we had to clean everything, which took up all of our day. Nobody got to finish that day. Hell, I'm here looking for new ideas. I thought I'd be into dominating type play. I liked the idea of being called names like whore or B-word until my husband called me that, consensually, and I cried. One time my husband was talking nasty to me while we did the deed and he called me a whore and I instantly burst into tears. Haha. I love being called the normal nasty stuff, like a dirty girl and a whore, but once my ex called me a pig and that's when I learned my limit. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Being slapped and called names and choked. I guess roughly doing the deed in general. I did it with this one guy who was super into it and he would choke me way too hard and slap me across the face. Kept calling me a fricking B-word and that I was nothing more than a whore and a dirty girl. He also spat on me during the deed. I realized that I wasn't into it at all and I cut things off. With my current partner though, he likes to choke me but he doesn't apply pressure, just wraps his hands around my neck and he says things like, "You like that, you dirty girl." And if I'm in the right mood, he only does it if I give him the go-ahead. I do quite enjoy it. P. I found a guy who was into it and I spent years fantasizing about it. Spent about a month fricking around with him and involving P in various ways. Turns out, it's just messy. I didn't dislike it, but I have no interest in doing it again. I still watch it in adult flicks though. Previous time this question was asked, some guy said he loved the idea of being crapped on. He found a lady of the night who offered the service, booked a session, and they got down to it. He said that as soon as she started crapping on him, he realized he really didn't like being crapped on. I'll bite and comment. Doing the deed outdoors. I absolutely loved that idea in fantasy. In reality, the beach is super cold and windy. Blankets are hard to keep on. Hobos walk up to you randomly even though you swear no one was around. Sand. Sand everywhere. Non-erotic walk back to the car. Disgruntled going home. Hopefully not a night killer. In the woods it's pleasant at first, but then the bug bites start. The cold nips your skin. Bark is rather rough and has ants. Feeling secluded yet not isolated, always wondering if someone will walk by. Splinters. Rocks that are pointy jabbing into random parts of your body trying to do positions. Wild animals around. Other than that, the other that I'd say is melon clamps. I thought they were more exciting than the painful they turned out to be. Kind of basic, but the daddy or little girl thing. I love being dominated, but my gosh, it felt so degrading and not in a good way. And creepy acting like a ditzy child who needs approval to do everything. Not to insult anybody who's into it, but yeah, I realized it wasn't for me after all. I was super into the idea of whacking it while wearing a skirt, and when my girlfriend found out, she was kind of into the idea of me doing the deed with her while I wore a skirt because she was bisexual. Her words, not my assumption, but it didn't really work for either of us. Then again, I think we might not have been compatible or just inexperienced, because I also thought I didn't like girls going down on me until my next girlfriend did, and it was a revelation. Gangbang. Definitely not working out in my favor. Agreed. I didn't actively dislike it, but 4 dudes whacking the goose while watching you do the deed is a little strange. I was mostly shocked by the lightheartedness and jovial atmosphere. Do you want to turn in her butt? Oh, sure, thanks, man. Absolutely, let me get out of the way. When the whole thing was wrapping up, the chick was on her knees with everything getting ready to splooge into her face, and one guy almost blew it on my shoe, and I said something to the effect of, "Hey, watch the shoes, man." To which everyone, her included, started cracking up, just to further illustrate the jovial atmosphere. Well, after reading that, I can confirm what I already knew, that I have no desire to try it out. Also, the less of my friends' eggplants I see in my life, the better. Doing the deed with someone who was cheating on her boyfriend. We were friends with benefits before, but then she got a boyfriend. A few weeks later, she still contacted me. Going at her place, I thought it was hot, but then all I kept thinking about was him and how he was probably in love with her, and how crushed his heart would be if he knew. There's nothing fun or phantasmagorical about that, I thought. I had a panic attack, left, cut contact with her, and now I just feel dirty. Every bit deserved, though. Pegging and milking. It was fricking exhausting. I felt like, why haven't you splooged already? I'm bored. After an hour of licking, positions, thrusting, titillating, the taint, Crisco, blah blah blah, I felt blessed as a woman and I had a new respect for the endurance people had to get me off. Pee. Even if you're cool with it during the act, the second you get off you realize you're just covered in pee. And if you're like me, you try it again just to be sure and you want to bang your head into a wall because you can never be unpeed on. I don't know if it's the same per se because it's kind of mainstream, but three-ways just aren't as fun as I thought. The pressure to make sure everyone was having a blast kind of ruined it for me. Don't want anybody to feel left out, you know? Doing the deed outdoors. I got a 2-inch splinter of wood shoved right up my butt. In the cheek, that is. Can confirm, ended up with half my leg covered in poison ivy. And no, dumb 17-year-old me didn't see any poison ivy around before the deed. Being called daddy. The first time doing the deed with this girl I met in the bar, she goes right into, "F me, daddy." I always thought it would be hot to hear, but nope. Instant eggplant kill. My mind immediately went to, oh crap, she might have some serious issues. Turns out I was right too. I thought I'd be into choking. I already liked to be lightly spanked and act like a bratty sub. I think it's funny to be annoying, so I just thought it would be a natural step in my kinks. Didn't like it one bit. Nothing bad really happened, no freak accident, just got turned off real quick. I once hooked up with a girl who said she liked to be choked. I was kind of a mild guy, but I was like, okay, if that's your thing. The moment I saw her eyes as I was grasping her neck, I thought, holy crap, she really likes that. And that turned me on like frick. Also, it's nice to be lightly choked when being treated yourself. See, on the one hand, it kind of upsets me because I really thought I'd like it because of what you described, and that sounds awesome. But alas, it just does nothing for me. Woman here, doing the deed while asleep. I'd go pantyless when sleeping out of comfort, but I also gave my boyfriend the go-ahead to frick me if he wanted. Didn't bother with foreplay, just his eggplant. I wasn't prepped and it didn't feel great. Another partner kissed my hotspot when he wanted it in the morning, whilst I was asleep, and it made a difference. Having a willing, of course, shall we say servant. I thought it would be hot as heck to have an undressed girl in the apartment following my every command. In the end though, it just felt awful. Instead of, "Suck my freaking member, B-word," it was, "Suck my member now, if you want to. Please?" Easy, milk or pain stuff. I went through a bad breakup, went to pick myself up via sleeping around. Slept with a recently ex-pregnant girl who was into pain and leather and other stuff. That crap hurt and I was uncomfortable, and don't get me started on the milk, disgusting, and it got all over. Had a long cry after that one, I still gag when I think about it. I thought I was bi until I sucked a member and now I'm gay. Anime body pillow doesn't feel real enough. Who would have thought that? I thought I would like female domination, so my girlfriend tied me up and just started beating the crap out of me. She hit my wang with a whip and it started bleeding so bad I had to go to the emergency room. You can imagine how awkward that was. Not sure if this qualifies as a kink, but like many people I thought that bigger was better in the eggplant department. Then I slept with a few people who had big ones. 1. Ow. 2. Fricking ow. No thanks, not into it. Now I'm with a guy who fits me perfectly, in a physical sense, although we're compatible in other ways too, and doing the deed with them is the best. Not too big, not too small, just right. 15 years of marriage and I tell my silly husband he too has the perfect eggplant, and he still denies the compliment. Average-sized eggplant is the best eggplant. Period. I really thought I was into having someone pee on my face. Unfortunately, the angle was wrong and it went up my nose. Burned like heck and tasted awful. I'm really not into that anymore. Does anyone else here have an incredibly boring bedroom life and is just reading and listening to the responses for fun? I've had several times I'm so turned on I want to splooge and eat my own splooge. But once I actually get off, that desire disappears instantly. Once I tried it out of curiosity and a simple lick was enough to verify that it's not for me. I was in my early 20s and I thought I was into some more advanced stuff. I took to the internet and found a D couple through AFF who wanted a third, who was also a dom. I was feeling adventurous, so I agreed to play. I'd only had some vanilla stuff before, so what started happening was blowing my innocent mind. First off, this was a very attractive couple. The wife was hot. She started by laying across my lap with her butt in the air. I was whacking her butt. I'd never done this before. I just had no idea what I was doing. Then he put a leash on her and she's crawling to the back room on hands and knees. We get there and she crawls up onto the bench thing and he restrains her at the wrists and ankles. He brings out some floggers and he's showing me how to flog his wife. This is all super crazy and intense. He ends up aggressively doing it with her with my eggplant in her mouth. I'm 10-ply down there because I'm so nervous. He ends up finishing on their bed. It was a little awkward, but all in all an eye-opening experience. Turns out I enjoy some ropes and a little bit of rough play, but I'm not much of an aggressive dom. I had a massive public but discreet thing as a teenager. My first real girlfriend and I couldn't really get alone time to do the deed because her mum was homophobic and hated that I was making her daughter gay or whatever, so it kind of worked out that we had to do the deed in public places. We went on a date to the mall together and she tried to get me to go down on her in the family bathroom. I was too anxious and people kept knocking really hard on the door. When we came out, there was like a line of people going around the corner. Didn't realize it was fricking Black Friday. We pretended like I was sick and had been throwing up in there. I was 16 and my anxiety disorder was much more intense, so it wasn't far from the truth. But gosh darn, never again. An entire crowd of judgmental, teed-off people staring at you will kill a kink for good. What's the scariest glitch in the matrix you've experienced? So I was in a friend's apartment with a bunch of people just hanging out. Eventually, I ended up on the floor sitting due to a lack of seats. Then it hit me. That feeling of déjà vu. You know, where you lose your entire train of thought and try to make sense of what's going on? After a couple of seconds, it hits again, except I remember experiencing déjà vu. At this point, I stand up and start walking around frantically. I reach one of the doorways, and there I remember a specific person came up and asked if I was okay, and I shrugged the whole thing off. A couple of seconds later, that person came up again and said the same thing, word for word, and I freaked out even more. In conclusion, I think I had a stroke. Went to sleep at 10 p.m., woke up at 9 p.m. on the same day. I still don't understand.
You were asleep on an airplane traveling west.
Maybe the clock was wrong or daylight saving time confused you and you didn't sleep for more than a few minutes. I was at a camp in the deep, deep wilderness. Nearest cell service was 40 miles away. Only me and my wife. She was in the cabin. I walked out to the porch and down the stairs at night. I heard someone call my name in the direction I was walking. I turned right around and noped back into the cabin without missing a step.
Obligatory Goatman reference.
I woke up with 3 shirts on and 5 pairs of underwear. I was like 8 and thought the boogie monster did it. Scarred me for life. I was completely convinced that my family had told me that my uncle died. I even bummed out about it and talked to people about it at work. Then 2 weeks later, my sister brought him up and I said, "Wait, he's dead, what are you talking about?" And realized that my brain had just fabricated all of the memories. Or I'd had a dream so realistic I'd assimilated it as real memories. Very spooky. Yup, in stressy times, I'm particularly prone to really vivid dreams about unpleasant life events, both remembered from the past and imagined. In some cases, I haven't realized these events weren't current or real for a day or so. Moments before a bomb exploded behind my tank, I distinctly heard my TC, or tank commander, tell me to speed up, motherfricker. I accelerated and he began yelling at me, "Did I tell you to go faster, you dumb Boom! No one else heard him tell me to accelerate except for me. To be fair, this was late at night in 100-degree heat in a reclined position. I could have been driving in my sleep.
So it was a good thing. Like if you didn't speed up, it could have hit you instead of being behind you.
Poor as frick and living in a dreadful flat with my best friend. We scraped enough together for a 6-pack on a Sunday night. Monday morning there were 6 empty stubbies on the coffee table and 1 beer still in the fridge. We kept that magic beer for a while because it was magic, and then I forgot it was magic and drank it.
I can hear that conversation. "Hey man, where's the beer?"
"What beer?"
"The one in the fridge."
"Oh yeah, I drank it."
"You drank the magic beer?"
"Oh, frick."
And then a somber moment and reflection. But it's okay, because that means he becomes magic.
When I was about 8, I saw my mum walk into my room. I followed her because I was looking for her. When I entered my room, no one was in there. I then found her in the living room, which was all the way at the other end of the house. That was not your mom.
Yep, she's usually walking into my bedroom.
At work, bored as heck, checked my contacts for someone to talk to. Scrolling down and I noticed a high school girlfriend's name who I lost touch with for a couple of years. I mean, no phone calls, no discussions or common things with friends about her, nothing. The very moment I saw her phone number, boom, she rang. Not necessarily the creepiest story here, weird enough though. Sometimes I'm convinced that I can sense when my phone is about to go off. Sometimes I even know who is going to be the one texting me. I have no explanation and could never prove it. But like, I'll have not texted someone all day, and then I'll put my phone out of my pocket to see what our last text was, and they'll text me the second I swipe to unlock my phone. For a couple of good months, many times a week, my best friend and I would text each other at exactly the same instant. Sometimes I wonder if the human body can somehow sense incoming texts or calls, the same way certain computer speakers will buzz for 4 or 5 seconds before my phone notifies me of a text. I saw my female doppelganger once. We were walking past each other in a train station. We both turned around to look at the other person after we'd passed each other, jerked our heads and scrunched our faces like, "Do I know you?" Gave a surprised, wide-eyed look like, "That was pretty weird," then another slightly more exaggerated, "That was even weirder," followed by an audible in unison, "What the frick?" and nervous laughter, followed by a quick turn around and hurry away, and one last, "What the frick was that?" look back as we scurried away. If a bystander saw it, they would have thought it was scripted. Weird stuff, man. You were near a mirror? I saw my doppelganger once and it scared the crap out of me. He was on another team in the basketball tournament I was in, but he was a bit taller and more muscular than me. He looked so much like me that my teammates got scared and wouldn't look at him because it creeped them out so much. I swear I was looking at myself. I have dreams that are more abstract to me than normal, where something happens and I can't remember any of it. Weeks or sometimes months later, the exact situation happens that I dreamed about, and all the details came rushing back. It's like déjà vu, but I know I dreamed the exact situation. I just hadn't met the people or been to the place yet. This has happened many times as far back as I can remember. I've had the same exact day twice. They weren't dreams.
Was it a day doing nothing but browsing Reddit? Because that happens to me too.
A friend of mine got extremely high and went to get pizza. The guy knew he was on something and said,
"What did you just come back for?"
And my friend thought he was losing his mind.
One time I was really high and I was buying a movie ticket. The guy must have known I was high because when I asked for my ticket, he responded with,
"All right, sir, will that be for here or to go?"
That confused me so much for a moment. I actually thought I was ordering food. All I could say was, for here? And get the frick away from that guy.
Now I wonder how many high individuals I served in my fast food days and how many people I missed the opportunity to mess with. Laying on my bed with the door open, I hear something moving in the house. I was alone and get nervous. I stare at the end of the hallways, but then my dog ambles across going to another room. The sound was just him scratching. I watch him go into the other room and lay down. I think nothing of it and go back to Redditing. I glance up 3 seconds later and he's walking down the hallway again from where he originated. Not where he'd laid down, like he teleported back to a spawn and walked back there again. Needless to say, I lost my crap. I'd just come back from a 15-hour shift. It was 10 p.m. I haven't worked a double in a while, so I was very tired. I was on the 91 freeway in California at the Atlantic Avenue exit before the 710 freeway. I was fighting sleeplessness a few minutes ago and told myself I can stay awake, my exit home is only a few more miles. I dozed off. My internal clock kicked in and I whipped my head back to wake myself up. What I saw more than shocked me. I was sitting in the car garage. I looked at the clock and about 15 minutes had passed. So I'd dozed off for 15 minutes, although it felt like no more than 1 second. I'd managed to drive in my sleepy state 3 to 4 miles, off the exit, 2 lights, punched in the code to open the public garage, parked my car and woke myself up. I got out of the car and looked around, making sure I didn't run anyone over. Yep, no blood, no brains, no evidence of body tissues. I followed the news in my area for a few days and there were no fatal hit and runs. When I was a kid, I would always have the same recurring nightmare at my grandpa's house. The dream was always about a man accidentally catching himself on fire and burning to death. A couple of months ago, I found out that a man recklessly caught himself on fire while he was building my grandfather's house. My grandpa even put out the fire and held the guy before he died. Fricking mind frick. The closest thing that makes me think that ghosts are real. You probably heard that somewhere and you weren't paying attention to it, but your subconscious definitely was. This happened about 2 weeks ago. It was hot and there was a storm approaching, so I decided I'd jump in the pool real quick and be out before the hail started. After about a minute in the water, I looked up to check and see 2 eagles just floating there, not moving at all. Like time stopped. I'm sure they were just riding the current, but they didn't even sway a bit. Not left, not right, not up or down. Nothing. I was like, frick it. I dived underwater for a while, and when I came back up, they were in another part of the sky, again not moving. They're catching updrafts before the storm due to the gust front. When a storm comes in, birds like to ride the updrafts because they don't use much of their own energy, but they're able to get high as frick. In Missouri, there's a lot of Native American folklore surrounding thunderbirds, which precede thunderstorms and bring rain, and are a symbol of fertility. Nah, those are just the NSA's freedom drones. 2 days ago, I grabbed a Calvin and Hobbes book while searching for pregnancy books for my manager, whose wife is pregnant. I haven't touched this book in years. I open it up and I find an old birthday card from my wife saying, "I hope you have a wonderful weekend." She died 2.5 years ago. Today is my birthday. I flipped a coin, a quarter or a nickel, and it landed on its side. It was for pizza or wings for dinner. So my dad and I just noped and got Chinese. The correct response was to get both. I dropped a nickel once and had it land exactly on its side like that, no bouncing or rolling, just a thud as it hit the floor. Wouldn't be weird except we were visiting Monticello at the time, which is the building on the back of the coin. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was at a bar once and I saw someone walk up the stairs with a similar haircut and glasses and thought, there I am walking up the stairs. It was really weird. I actually thought I was watching myself walk up the stairs. I was a little shocked by this and mentioned it to my friend and a girl next to me, who said, "That's happened to me before. I've never told anyone." She told me how she was watching out of a train window while leaving a station, and she saw someone running for the train and said to herself, "Oh look, I'm running down the platform." I was running to catch a football in elementary school and it was super far away. The next thing I remember is me having the ball in my hand and everyone just donning a shocked expression. I asked them how the heck I got there and they had no clue. It was messed up to say the least. I thought I was Neo for a good while. I mean, this is a 9-year-old story. I wonder if this guy ever became NFL Jesus or not since then. Similar, but playing rounders, baseballish game in the UK. I'm not the sporty type, and that lesson was the worst in school, so they stuck me on 4th base, the last one. Anyway, the ball-throwing person threw the ball, the bat-having person whacked the ball was headed toward me, but off to the right. My right arm shoots out while the rest of my body maintains its "this lesson sucks" stance. Catches the ball, the bat person is out. Yay? I suppose. I wasn't even slightly paying attention to the game, and I'm left-handed. I guess my right arm is just a natural sports limb and decided it wanted its moment to shine. Poor thing. In conclusion, girl hit ball with a bat, I was over there daydreaming about God knows what, my right arm shoots out of its own accord and catches the lass out. End of story. I started that app Tinder recently, and I was chatting with one of the first girls I matched with. I asked her about a tattoo on her arm that I saw in one of her photos. It looked to me like a flaming top hat, so I jokingly asked if that's what it actually was. A few hours later, I was sitting in my bed reading the book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, when I see a phone notification. She had responded, "Oh no, it's actually a bowler hat and arms. The artwork from my favorite book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being by Milan Kundera. I have a date with her next week. I don't know if or when to bring it up. Did I just meet my future wife or something?" My grandmother passed when I was young, maybe 8. When I was around 16, I had a dream that I was hanging out with her and talking and catching up. She stood up in the dream to leave and I begged her not to go, and asked her when I could see her again. She said nothing, but pointed to a calendar that had a date circled. I remember the date when I woke up. It was several months in the future and told my mum about the dream, as she was always interested in that kind of stuff. Several months go by, and the date in the dream is approaching within the next few days. My cousin's husband gets killed in a freak car accident, and my parents fly across the country to be with family. They're gone over the date in the dream, and my mum, being superstitious about the dream, makes me promise not to leave the house that day. I agree, no big deal. My parents are going to be gone, what did I need to leave for? The day in the dream arrives, and my friend calls me up to ride into the city with him. I say no thanks. Later that night, I get a call from him that he was in a bad car accident and his car's totaled. Passenger side all smashed to heck. If I'd been with him. Really weird one. My brother was really sick with a brain tumor and was dying. He had basically been a vegetable for a while and then one day he woke up and was fine. Anyway, he was acting really strange. It was very strange, but I remember him just sitting up like a robot, walking to the bathroom and closing the door. My mum and I were super scared and weirded out by this, so we checked on him and he yelled, "Hey, what is this, a sideshow?" in a really gruff New Yorker accent. The rest of the day was really surreal, and he wasn't him. Then he went back to his vegetative state and died a while later. Anyway, years later I saw a cartoon where someone walks into a bathroom and a fly is on the toilet, and in a gruff New York accent the guy shouts, "What is this, a sideshow?" So creepy. Oh, and I found the cartoon. It was Rocko's Modern Life. I never dreamed about my grandma for some reason. She just wasn't part of my nightly cast. Ever. But one night a few years ago, I had this dream that my family, including her, came to visit me at my college. In my dream, my university was in the middle of Disneyland. I've had recurring dreams about depressing theme parks since I was little, and in the middle of my university was a hospital. While I was showing my family around, we neared the hospital. Suddenly, all we could see were maimed, burned, and dismembered bodies lying around screaming for help and bleeding to death, like some graphic war movie. It was terrifying, and suddenly my grandma had a heart attack from the sheer horror of it all. She was immediately admitted to the hospital ahead of the dismembered people for some reason, and soon after, died. I woke up physically shaken and unnerved. 2 hours later, I got a call from my mum saying that my grandma was admitted to hospital due to a heart condition. She died 3 days later, never having recovered. I wasn't the same for weeks, and this wasn't the only time this has happened. This probably won't be believed, not because it's super fantastic or anything, but it was an interesting occurrence for me. I just finished my last class of the day at university, and I went to grab a sandwich from a sandwich shop. While in line, I had a strange feeling, and basically a voice in my head saying, "Buy a second sandwich, buy a second sandwich." I had this odd feeling I was going to need this second sandwich. I felt really strange about it, but for some reason I decided to follow my instincts and buy it. So I ate one of the 2 sandwiches I'd purchased, then I exited the building. It was a sandwich shop inside of a large building of classrooms on campus, so I could walk to my car. As I'm walking along the street to the parking garage, I have to pass a bus stop. At the bus stop, there's just this one guy hanging out there. He's most likely one of the homeless or poor people that are often around school. It wasn't that unusual, really. As I'm walking by, the guy looks me straight in the eyes and asks, "Hey, is there any way I could have that sandwich?" I was a little stunned, but at the time, I felt like I'd been prepared for the situation somehow. I almost immediately handed the sandwich to the guy and said, yeah, it's all yours," and the guy was extremely thankful. I then just walked to my car. I guess it's just a law of large numbers kind of thing, but it was a very odd experience. If I'd had any other reason for buying 2 sandwiches, I probably would have just chalked it up to random chance or gluttony or feeling generous. But I distinctly recall the weird, uncomfortable feeling of kind of being told to purchase a second sandwich for some unknown reason, and thinking I was losing my mind from too much stress or a long day at school. And then it was just too perfect. The guy just seemed to be waiting there for me to somehow deliver the sandwich. Maybe he was meditating on getting a sandwich, and we're all sort of connected on some kind of universal thought network, and his thoughts happened to affect mine. I guess that's only my semi-functional theory. Anyway, kind of a cool story in some ways. One of the tamest stories here, to be sure, but I've definitely had similar moments of unusual resolve and quick decision. Maybe you all have too. Some drunk guy knocked over a firework mortar and sent a ball of glowing ambulance tickets at me. Then everything's kind of a blur. Then I was on the ground, but there wasn't a scratch on me. Not even a bit of pain or blood or anything. I still don't know what the frick happened. I had a weird dream with monsters in my house and stuff. Then I woke up and found a monster sleeping next to me, and I freaked out and screamed. The dream repeated itself, and I woke up again to find the monster next to me. It repeated itself to what seemed like endlessly until I woke up sweaty as frick and found a figure next to me and screamed as loud as I could. But it's my dad. For a second, it looked nothing like my dad. I was at the store when I heard my boyfriend's ringtone on my phone. I went to answer but couldn't find my phone. I'd forgotten it at home because I'd plugged it into the charger. When I got home, I saw a missed call from him at the time where I'd heard the ringtone. Me and my cousins went night fishing on the coast once. During the night, all of the fish get more active and supposedly come closer to the surface because there aren't birds snatching them up, so it's ideal for casting a rod into the waves. Anyway, I'd been on the rods from 6 to 8 p.m. and I was cold and tired, so I switched over with a cousin and tucked myself into the blanket and beach chair thing that we'd bought. It was getting to be dusk now, and I looked out along the beach, and about 300 meters up, I see a lump that looks to be moving its way up from the ocean and along the beach. I pointed out to my cousin, who also noticed it, but it's dark now and very cold, so we couldn't really be bothered investigating. I keep looking back every 10 minutes or so because it's the only thing that's interesting when you're waiting for a fish to hook itself. And sure enough, it is further up the beach each time, slowly crawling. I can see small limbs fluttering and trying to shift its large body forward, and so I assume this is a sea turtle heading into shore to lay eggs. I'm interested in seeing this a little closer, so I walk off toward it with a torch. As I get closer, it stops shuffling, but I can make out its form a lot better. Its domed back and flat limbs are semi-obscured by sand. As I get to 50 meters away, I'm struck by confusion. It no longer resembles a sea turtle, but it turns out to be a piece of driftwood. What the frick? I say out loud. I'd watched this thing crawl its way up the beach and distinctly remember seeing sand flick up around it as it crawled. I walked back to our fishing spot and looked back, and sure enough, it has crawled up into the tree line. A couple of bros and I were sleeping in the same bed as we were known to do, with me being on the side against the wall, guy 1 in the middle and guy 2 on the open side of the bed. So we're all like wrestling around and telling scary stories, or whatever the frick teenagers do, and then before we know it, our tired little eyes drift us off into the land of Nod. When we wake up into the morning, I was on the open side of the bed and guy 2 was on the side against the wall. So we'd somehow managed to trade places in the middle of the night with no memory of how. We woke up to guy 1 sitting up, looking at us and loudly saying, "What the frick?" So apparently the vast majority of the people who've read this have never cuddled with their bros before at night. What are you, gay or something? What was the funniest police encounter you've witnessed? I once transported a man who sang ABBA the whole 2-hour drive. I asked if he was on something in case I needed assistance walking him in once we got there. He said, "No, if I have to be punished, so do you." So then we sang ABBA together. It was awful.
Did he know a bunch of songs or even one all the way through? Or was it just like, you can dance, dancing queen, over and over for 2 hours?
One that my dad liked to tell. He was behind a car at a traffic light and noticed that the driver seemed very nervous and kept glancing in the rearview mirror. It was a long light, so he had time to run the plate to check for any abnormalities. Sure enough, the driver had reason to be nervous, as he had stolen a shiny new sports car, and the marked police car behind him seemed to have figured this out. For whatever reason, Dad ended up in a lot of car chases in the 33 years as a cop, and started carrying a helmet to keep from getting banged up as much. When the car came back stolen, he reached over, grabbed his helmet, put it on, and tightened the chin strap. Expecting the guy was now going to run as the lights turned green, he caught the driver looking back at his now crash-helmeted self and gave a huge grin indicating he was ready for an epic car chase. As soon as the lights turned green, the driver went through the light and pulled over before Dad even turned on the lights and siren. When Dad got to the window and asked him why he had pulled over, the driver said, "Sir, this car isn't mine, and honestly, I was gonna make a run for it, but then I saw you put a helmet on and I knew you meant business." Running a clearly intoxicated woman through SFSTs, or standardized field sobriety testing, I'm trying to check her eyes, which calls for her to keep her head completely still and follow my finger with her eyes only. Every time I move my finger to the side, she just keeps looking at my face. I remind her several times to follow my finger and eventually ask her if she plans on trying at all. She gently touches my cheek and in her slurred, drunken speech says, "How am I supposed to concentrate when you're so fricking handsome?" I was flattered. She later spewed on me at the jail. Ah, boozy and very flattering older ladies. I don't always miss working at bars with people like that, and I'm sure that any number of them could have ended up in a situation like this. The best one I ever had, I remember it was about 10 or 11 at night, not too early but late enough that it was easy to catch speeders on the highway, doing 30 or 40 over the limit. The speed limit was 90 km per hour and this vehicle is off in the distance and I clock him at a zoomy 70 km per hour. I think to myself that the only reason the vehicle is driving slow is due to impairment. I'm figuring an easy impaired charge. After pulling the vehicle over, I approach the driver, shine my light in, and see a very elderly gentleman. He looks at me and said something along the lines of, "Why did you pull me over? I know I wasn't speeding." I told him that I agreed with him, and after getting his license and vehicle registration, I told him I'd pulled him over for going so slowly, and that I worried he was impaired. There were no visible indications or odor of impairment. He let out a big smile and said he hasn't had a drink in over 40 years. Upon asking him why he was driving so slowly, when with very little traffic on the road most vehicles speed, his response was this: "Son, it was my monthly model train meetup tonight, and it's the one night my wife lets me go out by myself. When you've been married over 50 years, you appreciate the silence and private times. I'm in no rush to get back home." For our American readers, 90 km per hour is approximately 150,000 furlongs per fortnight.
Wow, he probably averaged 40 rods to the hogshead at those speeds.
Damn, that's a breezy 550 half-clops per daisy willow. Almost every time I've ever been pulled over, the cop takes my license and after calling it in, comes back with it and asks me to get out of the car. I get out, stand up, and they say,
Holy crap, I thought 218 centimeters was a typo.
Then after some laughing and chatting, they let me go on my way. A couple of times they've even taken my photo selfie style. It's kinda funny, and only the crustiest of the new recruits ends up writing me a ticket. I remember my friend and I were behind these factories that were near his childhood house. We always wanted to go back there and just look around. As we were down there, a cop car rolls up on us, and I immediately thought we were going to get in trouble for trespassing. The cop asks my friend what we're doing here, and then points to the sign where it said, "No trespassing." I was shocked by my friend's response. He begins to speak Spanish to the cop, telling him we were abiding by the law. He tells the cop in fake broken English, "We no trespassing. We only two people. Sign says no trespassing." I literally had to hold in laughter, but the cop burst out laughing and told us to go home. There's a homeless guy in my city who has a few mental issues. He's typically easy to deal with, so we normally leave him alone. But every now and again he'll do something that warrants an arrest or a trip to the hospital for a mental health evaluation, and when he realizes that he's about to be arrested, the very first thing he does is take off his clothes. This guy is about 5'2" and has absolutely the largest wang that any of us have ever seen. He'll then run into the street and dance with his giant dong flapping all over the place while we try to take him into custody. He will even occasionally drop a dookie during the process. Most of us officers who have some time will do anything to avoid him, or send the rookies to do the duty work.
Ah, meat spinning the first-timers I see. Good work, Corporal.
You know what they say, crap flows downhill. My neighbor is a cop, and he just told me the story of how he pulled over a lady and her little 3-year-old kid who looked very frightened of him pulling over his mum. Before he could say anything, she said,
"Oh, honey, don't worry. Police officers are our friends. This nice man is supposed to make sure we all follow the rules."
Got the lady for 13 over in a pretty empty street, ran her information, and was going to give her a ticket, since it was 13 over in a 35. The kid said, "All right," when he started walking to his car.
"Wait, I'm having a birthday tomorrow. You don't have to bring anything. I just want all my friends there."
Too cute to ticket, and the mum said he could come by. Little man's getting a cool Lego set too. This sounds like the premise of a really adorable family movie. Cop comes to party and falls in love with single mom. Adorable child is what brought them together. I also want to make clear that policing is not an effective way to prevent or reduce crime. Abolition is possible. I wouldn't watch this movie unless it engaged with the cop leaving his job. Not me, but my brother. He was driving our family's 1980s minivan home and was flying down a hill. The cop nabbed him at the bottom and asked him if he knew how fast he was going. The only response he had was, "Well, honestly, officer, the speedometer tops out at 85, so I really have no idea." The officer cracked up, but still gave him a ticket. When I was still in field training, I was doing traffic stops with my field training officer, or FTO. We stopped this one kid who I felt like I'd seen before, but he also happened to have a warrant out. I said, "Hey man, I'm sorry, but it seems you have a warrant and I'm going to have to take you in today. Can you please step out?" He opens the door and glances back at my FTO and hesitated for a second. I saw him target glancing toward the parking lot across the street, so I asked, "You're not going to run on me, right?" And he said, "No ma'am, not from you. I've seen you at the gym."
"But you'd run from my sergeant?"
"Oh yeah, I've seen him at McDonald's." I couldn't hold it in. Haha. Can't fault the kid's logic, although I have to say that half the people I've seen at the gym can't run for crap either. Gains and cardio together, people. At a previous employer, our main data center was about 10 minutes up the road from the office. Trips between the two were commonplace. We all ran back and forth frequently. This day, we were having a connectivity issue to an entire rack of gear, and I was flying over to the data center to troubleshoot. There was construction between the office and DC, and it had been there for weeks by this point. Fines are doubled in construction zones in the state I live in, and I'm usually careful to not speed in them because those tickets are expensive. Because I was mentally reviewing why we were down and in a hurry, I failed to see the motorcycle cop sitting dead center of the construction zone with his radar gun pointed in my direction until I was in third gear and 10 over the posted limit, which was 20 over the construction zone limit. He nailed me and we both knew it. Since I knew he was coming, I just pulled over into the next parking lot and he came in behind me. Damn. 30 over in a construction zone. This is gonna suck. I grabbed my paperwork out of the glove box and waited for him to do his preliminary check before he came over to talk to me. As he walked up, I greeted him by saying, "Hello, officer. I'm a dumbass, aren't I?" He stared at me for a quick second like he was trying to maintain his composure and just couldn't do it. Started chuckling, and then after a couple of seconds he burst into these deep belly laughs. Probably laughed for a good 30 seconds before he responded, "Well, just remember, those are your words and not mine." I admitted to the offense, but asked if he could please get me back on my way quickly because I had this fire going on at work. He was really cool about it. He still wrote me the ticket, but it was for 11 over, and he put the location as an intersection that was past the construction zone. That was about $900 less in fines that I'd be potentially facing, and made it an infraction I could take traffic school for instead of paying the fine. Super awesome guy. In conclusion, sometimes being cooperative and lightening up a not-so-great situation does help. I blew by a cop once, probably doing like 30 miles per hour over the speed limit on a back road. As soon as I blew by him, I knew I was fricked, but it was also hilly road, so I didn't actually see him pull out. But again, I knew that I was done, so I just pulled over and waited. Like 5 minutes later, the cop doles up behind me with his siren and lights on. When he comes up to the window, I just immediately said, "I'm sorry, officer, I was super over the limit there, and that's my fault." And he was just like, "Why did you pull over? You probably could have lost me pretty easily." "Well, I knew I was speeding, and I knew you were going to pull me over, so I figured I'd just make it easier for both of us." Then he told me how I was the only person who'd ever pulled themselves over for him, and to slow down the next time on that road. Thanks, nice cop.
Pro tip: wait until the officer is at your vehicle and asks for a license and registration before you go diving into your glove box. It might look like you're jumping to grab a weapon, and police officers don't like that.
The only time I wasn't asked to get out of my car for a traffic stop was when I did this. I don't know what to think now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not a cop, but this happened when I was in like 4th or 5th grade as my grandmother was taking me home from school. Grandmother suffered from really bad IBS and was speeding to get home to use the bathroom. The cop pulls us over and makes it to the window, and my grandma says,
"Look, young man, I have bowel problems and I'm rushing home to go to the bathroom,"
and just pulls out and leaves. The cop runs back to his car and speeds to catch up with us, follows us through the next small town to her house. She gets straight out of the car and goes into the house, while the cop keeps saying, "Ma'am, come back here, ma'am, you can't go inside," etc. She totally ignores him. At this point, my grandpa pulls up because someone had called him at his work to tell him a cop was following my grandma through the 2 small towns and that they thought something could be wrong. Grandpa asks what's going on, and the cop starts telling him to go get his wife because she's in a lot of trouble. Grandpa just says, "What did you want her to do, crap in her purse on the side of the road? You need to leave before you embarrass my wife." The cop is flabbergasted and just gets in his car and leaves. Grandpa and I walk in the house, and my grandpa is getting out of the bathroom and says,
"I need to go talk to that young man and get my ticket."
Grandpa tells her, "He was just following you home to make sure you got there safe. Are you feeling okay?" He gives her a kiss and goes back to work. Grandpa was classy, they both were. Miss you, Mormor and Pawpaw.
My uncle got pulled over once for speeding on the I-95. He said, "Oh damn, I got the highway sign confused with the speed limit sign again." The cop laughed and let him go with a warning. This happened a while ago while I was attending EMT training. In order to keep the class from driving us all crazy from boredom, the other students and I would sometimes joke around and pull pranks on each other. One day, as we were all leaving and getting ready to drive away, I had the brilliant idea to roll down my window and pretend to get a call over the radio. After announcing that I was en route to the scene, I grabbed a suction cup adult eggplant toy that I'd hidden, purchased and used specifically for the joke, was destroyed after completion of said joke by the way, and slapped it on the roof of my car like some kind of old-school styled blue light. I then proceeded to scream like an ambulance siren and floor it out of the lot, much to the enjoyment of my classmates. On my way home, I was doing slightly over double the speed limit on a large highway when I saw flashing lights behind me. Being a stupid teenager, I decided to take an exit and then get back on the other side of the highway. I got pulled over, but only then realized that I still had a rubber member sitting nice and tall on the roof of my car. My greatest fears came true when the officer walked up and recognized me from school, as he was the school patrolman. Miraculously, he let me go despite the absurd speeding and possible evading. In conclusion, I was an idiot, my car had a member, and the cop luckily wasn't a member. I wonder if one could potentially get done for indecent exposure while sporting such a hood ornament. Probably not, I suppose, but there are other charges that I might not even know about.
Also, did anyone think that he was a bit defensive about having destroyed and never used that particular adult toy? Just me? My aunt is a police officer. Her favorite story at parties is how she once arrested a nearly undressed man who was running through a busy street. As she likes to put it, the only thing he was wearing was a rubber chicken, and he was wearing it through penetration. One time I was driving and saw a cop, so I rolled all 4 of my windows down at one time because my tint was illegal. The law where I'm from is that it has to let in 50% of the light or more, and mine was only letting in 20. As he got up to my car, he started laughing and told me he liked my effort and only wrote me a warning. My cousin had his windows tinted dark, but not too dark, and got a ticket. He went to court with the documentation of the window tint job, and the judge said he was good to go. Driving home, my cousin got pulled over for the window tint and got another ticket. The cop asked me if I knew why he had pulled me over. I said, "Speeding?" He said, "No, you rolled through a stop sign back there, but now that you mention it, it did take me a while to catch up with you." The cop, my friend in the passenger seat, and myself started laughing as I had this "oh crap" moment. He let me off with a warning. Nice guy. Not a cop, but I made one laugh once when I was a little too drunk and laying on the sidewalk in a bar district. "Son, what exactly do you think you're doing here?" as he taps my shoulder with his boot. "Hopefully I'm reminding you of someone else you like because this was just the worst first impression." He laughed and helped me find some Gatorade and my friends instead of arresting me for public intoxication. So, Officer Brian, if you're out there, things are going much better, and thanks for being cool with me when things were just starting to get better.
100% true story. A few friends and I go out for our buddy's 21st birthday party, and he proceeds to get rickety wrecked. I'm talking like doesn't know his own name wrecked. So we lose him. Josh is gone. The next morning, I get a phone call and it's Josh. Apparently, he had left the bar, wandered for a while, found a construction site, and fallen asleep on a stack of plywood. He was awakened by a nudge to the shoulder, and he jumps up, still kinda drunk, and there's a cop standing beside him. The cop asks him, "Son, what the heck are you doing? It's dangerous to be sleeping out here, especially in this part of town." Josh is standing there in khakis and a button-down shirt, but he's clearly still inebriated. He bends over, picks up the hard hat, puts it on, and says, "I'm just early for work." The cop bursts out laughing and lets him call a friend to pick him up.
Josh sounds hideous.
Oh, I want that to be true. If it is, it's the best drunk story I've ever heard.
I'm not a cop, probably closer to a criminal, but one night about 6 years ago I had a local cop near peeing himself. I was walking home from the pub one night when I decided I'd rather get some snacks and call a taxi. I walk up to a gas and convenience store and open the door. I noticed no one was at the cash register, so figured they were in the bathroom. I grab a sandwich, some chips, and a giant piece of beef jerky and go to the checkout. I call out hello a couple of times and then jumped out of my skin when the alarm starts to go off. I panic and start to run out of the door, and then I stop and grab my food. Then I say to myself, "Wait, I haven't actually done anything." So I pull out my cell phone and call 911.
Hello? 911?
I think I accidentally broke into the Ultramar. About 10 minutes later, the police show up and cuff me and begin searching the entire area. One cop stayed with me, and I told him I didn't actually do anything, but he just says, well, he'll be the judge of that. When the manager arrives to review the security cameras, well, she shows up and is a total B-word. I don't think she likes being woken up at 3 a.m. Well, the cop comes out of the office, laughing so hard he's crying, uncuffs me and apologizes, then gives me a ride home and a trip to the drive-thru. I was flagged down by a random motorist. I contacted the driver and he advised me there was a gentleman running out into the street and throwing rocks at cars near the water tower. I advised radio and requested county to respond since it would be on a county road. I approached the area and didn't see any pedestrians in the road or anyone throwing rocks. However, I did see a lady parked on the shoulder, making what appeared to be a frantic phone call. I pull up next to her and asked if she'd seen the rock thrower. She advised she did and pointed at another roadway. By the time county shows up, we both proceed in the direction the second motorist advised. The deputy and I make a right turn, and sure enough, there he is, undressed, with his boxers down around his ankles, standing square in the middle of the road. The deputy and I exit our cars and start walking toward the guy. As I'm walking, I notice a pair of blue jeans entangled in a barbed wire fence to my left. It would seem he had attempted to climb the barbed wire fence but got hung up and gave up on the lower half of his Canadian tuxedo. The deputy and I quickly took him into custody and asked him why he was running around the roadway scaring the local citizens. He says, "What would you do if a gay guy gave you a bunch of money?" I had no answer, so I then asked him what he was high on and he explained, "Family issues," and I got a good laugh out of it. My friend of 16 years at the time's dad was a cop. His son is driving downtown Chicago and does a U-turn almost directly in front of a cop. Said cop pulls him over and sees that he has a police organization sticker on his windshield. The cop said, "Who's the cop?" The kid says, "You are, officer." "I meant in your family, idiot." The bud's answer sounds like something I would say in this situation. Funny that family members of cops can also be complete jelly-legged morons when they think they're in trouble with the law. I got pulled over once. The cop came up to the car and saw I had a bag stuffed under my front seat. He said in a really heavy Jersey accent, "What's in the bag?" In my fakest Jersey accent, I said, "Socks, officer, you want to see 'em?" He started laughing so hard he just told me to get out of there. Friend is riding with her sister to a friend's bridal shower. The 5-year-old niece, a total sassy pants, is in the car seat behind her mum. Driver. Police pulls mum over for speeding and asks, "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" The 5-year-old rolls down the window, looks at the cop with her mum's sunglasses on and states, rather loudly, "We were going to my auntie's party. She's getting married and I'm going to be the flower girl," and then rolls that window up like the starlet she is. The cop got the giggles and couldn't ticket her mum because, well, she was obviously just chauffeuring a star. When I was a cop, my partner was giving a man a field sobriety test after the man had wrecked his car. After denying being drunk several times, he said, "Okay, look, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've had nothing to drink, but I am high as a B-word." We all laughed and he went to jail. Got called to a domestic. A married couple had split, UK, and the husband was living elsewhere. It was a weekend and he'd come to collect his young child to sleep over that night. A childminder was looking after said child while the wife was out at work. The husband was parked on the narrow driveway and the wife arrived. She blocked him out of sheer nastiness. That's when we were called by the husband. The husband knew the law and wanted police to witness that no offense was caused. Husband places young child safely into his car, lovely new BMW estate, whilst childish wife screamed and laughed that he couldn't go anywhere. The husband smiles at us, the 2 officers, and Julie goes rallying across the front garden. I'm talking through 6-foot laurel bushes, across beautiful rose beds, the lot. The wife screamed at us now as the husband had left, wanted us to prosecute the husband for destroying her beautiful garden. We said no, it's his garden too, and no people were injured. How are white people stereotyped in predominantly non-white cultures? My wife from Cameroon was very surprised when she first saw white people that were poor. She didn't think it was possible. However, once I went to visit a market and I heard a guy shout, "White people are rich, but not this one. This white guy is poor." That was probably a clever way to get my attention to sell me something. Maybe as a consequence of being thought of as rich, white people are very important or prestigious. Once we met a cousin of my wife who was bragging that her husband had several cars. My wife replied, "Yeah, well, my husband is white." In Cameroon, most people believe in sorcery. One guy who was apparently knowledgeable about these kinds of things told me sorcery doesn't work on white people. +10 magic defense. Frick yes, hidden racial bonuses for the win. In the mountains of Peru, it's an urban legend of sorts that white people will steal children. So much so that when I'm around a misbehaving child, the mother almost always threatens the child by saying that the gringo, me, will take you away. That's kind of funny. As a white, I hold the stereotype that many South Americans would kidnap me and either sell me for ransom or as part of a substance cartel plot. Back in high school, we had 60% foreigners, Korean or Taiwanese mostly. The funniest thing I've ever been called was a round-eyed burger muncher. The kid was serious too. When I lived in the Middle East, I was told by an Arab friend that she always thought that white people, mainly the women, were very loose with their bedroom morals, and stuck up. It explained a lot of the not-so-nice things some of my classmates said about or to me before they got to know me. "You're not loose and stuck up like the rest of us? I'm so confused." "My grandfather was killed by being a stuck-up loose woman, you insensitive clod." "Oh, that's probably how I'm gonna go too." "We'll just mud wrestle our confusion away, as is the white custom." A lot of my Middle Eastern white friends think that white people only ever eat turkey and mashed potatoes or meatloaf. Well, to be fair, there are definitely certain gym-goers who would exclusively eat turkey if they could. There are also some Caucasian replies to this statement. "That's ridiculous. We only eat bacon cheeseburgers and fries, of course." "I nominate the milkshake as the official white person drink." I lived in a predominantly Hispanic area, and one thing that was always associated with white people was money. You were a rich white kid no matter how much money your parents had. No matter where you lived or how poor you were a rich white kid.
Hey man, look at Richie rich white boy over there, strutting around the Walmart car park, begging for change like he owns the frickin' place. Rich jackass.
Among Dominicans, white people are considered rich and generally friendly. We also think that no crime occurs around white people. It's considered highly respectable for a Dominican woman to have a white man, even if he is a low-life substance dealer. I can honestly say that most Dominican mothers would rather have their daughter date a white substance addict, garbage man, than a rich black doctor. White people are considered so above everyone else in our society. The funny thing is that to outsiders, Dominicans are black. Dominican women in the US want to be as far away from black culture as possible. They think they're white, basically. It's quite funny. When I went to the Dominican in October, they treated us like frickin' royalty. It was ridiculous. Our busboy told me he hated black people, which confused me. I assumed he was talking about Haitians. And all of the women wanted kisses from my blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid. They'd all call him over with Nino Blanco and ask for kisses on the cheek. My wife said,
"Well, at least we know he'll never have a problem with the ladies in the Dominican."
In Zimbabwe, white people are thought to have no knees. This is due to them wearing long trousers and dresses all the times, apparently. It's also, apparently, extremely funny to them.
This is extremely funny.
A real knee slapper, or a long leg slapper as my white brothers would call it. My brother's in jail for being a knee slapper. It's classed as racially aggravated assault. I've been to Liberia a couple of times, and I've picked up that a lot of the people think that the white people are rather ignorant of how the world works. They're very nice and helpful, but they make you feel like a child sometimes. Most of the time you have to rely on actual children to figure out what the heck is going on.
In all fairness, perhaps you should have let them watch out for you, even if it makes you feel like a child, given that you're visiting fricking Liberia.
Quite. The kids who I met there are more mature than a lot of my grown peers in the US. That said, they will kick your skinny white butt in kickball. Holy balls are they good. Stereotypical white statement. I'll use my credit card.
Oh, and do you have any non-dairy creamer?
I used to live in South Korea, and according to my friend, there's a belief amongst a few Asians that white people are less evolved because they have more hair.
I'm a balding white male. Am I evolving? Will I get superpowers?
My chemistry teacher always said, the more hair I lose, the more head I get.
That's actually a brilliant joke. Most kids won't realize the dirtiness of it until they're long gone. Or I need to get my mind out of the gutter.
I've lived in Tokyo most of my adult life. There's a stereotype hierarchy that goes from foreigner, that's the most important, then to the subsets of white, automatically considered a loudmouthed American who only speaks English, or black, automatically considered a hip-hop gangster who only speaks parody MTV English, or Asian. Yes, that's a stereotype in Japan. You'll be considered a dirty, poor Asian. I'm a musician, and unfortunately my appearance means I fall into a further subset, dangerous foreigner, probably a drug dealer. Because in Japan, everyone assumes most crime is by foreigners. Actually, crime by foreigners is proportionately much lower. So I get stopped by police all the time. I should add, just as being a black guy in a nice suit getting a coffee in Manhattan is a very different experience from being black with sagging pants and walking into a truck stop in Alabama, so Japan has a wide range of contexts which will affect your treatment here. My friend from Vietnam always talks about white people being crazy. He'd say if a black or Asian guy wants to kill you, he'll just shoot you. But if a white person wants you dead, he will eat you and commit the unspeakable act on your family.
Well, to be fair, in Vietnam, it's not hard to see where this one came from.
White people dance with their elbows instead of their hips.
False. I do not dance at all. In your face.
Then you ain't no friend of mine. White guy here, but when living near the border, I had 3 different Mexican guy friends tell me on 3 separate occasions that white women are freaks, i.e. promiscuous and adventurous to the point of intimidating. Apparently, I've been hanging around the wrong white women.
Nah, you just haven't been hanging around enough Latina women. White women are freaks in comparison, going by general cultural tendencies.
Oh, I know, the Mexican girls had flirting perfected beyond all comprehension, but from what I could tell, that's as far as it goes. See Pierce Brosnan's quote as Julian in The Matador. After flirting with some Mexican schoolgirls, he says, "I hate these Catholic countries. It's all blushy and no..." redacted by the narrator of this video. Where I grew up, the word for white man was mzungu. Came from the word kuzunguka. It means to walk around in circles. In my opinion, this is a good basis for what they thought of white people.
They sell shirts with Mzungu written on them in Kenya, presumably to tourists. My white father bought one because he thought it was humorous to have a shirt with "white guy" written on it.
Did you grow up in Zambia? I was there this past summer, and wherever I went, people would point and yell Mzungu.
Note to self, if ever in Africa and people yell Mzungu, start walking around in circles and observe reaction.
I have one of those shirts. I bought it in Uganda and it says, "My name is not Mzungu." I heard that word so many times in those 2 weeks that when I finally saw the shirt, I just laughed and threw copious amounts of money at the lady. They knew how to work the tourists, haha. I mean, it sounds like it would get you laughed at in the country for wearing it, but if you don't mind, great. Also, I hope you wore it back home just to confuse people. In Western China, where seeing a white person is so rare that people would stop dead when they saw me, stare, and often pull out a camera to snap some pictures of or with me, white people are considered beautiful, fashionable, sometimes ignorant, and a little sneaky. They assume we all speak English. Most people assume that I was British, I'm American, because I'm skinny. In fact, I had people ask me, after finding out that I'm from the US, "Why are you not fat?" I didn't talk a lot of politics with everyone, kind of a touchy subject in China, but I talked about it with the family I was living with. They thought that Americans were warmongers. They thought it has been too long since we had a real war on our soil and we've forgotten what it's like. We go into war to try and help people, but their opinion is that war helps no one. Some Koreans jokingly think that a lot of white American people greet each other with "Yo, what's up, man?" with the hand grab chest bump. Every male I know under age 22 does this regardless of race.
Male under the age of 22 here, hand grab chest bump overcomes all barriers.
As a Chinese person who mainly grew up in the United States, I don't know much about how whites are stereotyped in China, but my parents do. Essentially, in China, people have a love-hate relationship with white people, wanting to be like whites, which is mainly just Westerner. They want to be this way because of the power and status it represents, but at the same time are resentful of that power and status. By the way, in Cantonese, a slang term for blacks literally translates to fermented soybean, because of the black color of fermented soybeans. People will fall head over heels around a white person to the point where they'll just hire random white people to attend important parties or become spokespeople for their products. Contrast that with the disdain that they have for Chinese that come from America. My mum once said that if you, as a Chinese American, ever want to go back to China, that you'll get better waiter service if you bring along a white friend wearing a business suit. Sad, but true. There was an Economist article a while ago that talked about how Chinese were crisscrossing Europe to buy a lot of Western goods because it was a symbol of status in society that you could afford to buy those things. Many Chinese, likely due to a lack of education and exposure, are what I'd like to call extreme passive racists. This means that they have very stereotypical views of other ethnic groups, but they don't plan on taking action on those beliefs anytime soon. I'm sure it's like this for many other cultures as well.
So you're saying that if I moved to China and bought all my suits, I could do well for myself without a full-time job? I'd schmooze and eat for a living if that was an option.
Yes, in fact, there's a lot of people whose full-time job it is simply to be white and wear a business suit as part of a group of people in China. Now we know what Barney Stinson's job is.
Ha! Please.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I went to Nepal last year and apparently they believe white people never work. I was helping build playground equipment and crowds of people would show up to watch. They would gawk for hours. It weirded me out and this is what I was told when I asked.
When I was in Nepal, some kids bathing in the local river yelled, "You're American, you eat cats." I thought it was hilarious.
My Asian friend told me that all of her friends always felt that the white people they'd encountered smelt like milk, all the time.
I've heard this too, and it makes sense. People tend to give off odors based on their diets. Only white people drink so much milk and cheese. Most of the rest of the world is lactose intolerant.
Washichu, he who takes the best meat for himself. I'm a white guy who lived on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation for a few months. I always thought that Washichu was the only slur I've ever been called that actually bothered me. A young Oglala told me it means takers of the fat, for white people killing buffalo and only taking the fat. The best part. We had a little joke or pun at meals. Who took the last piece of fry bread? Washichu? Other stereotypes held by some Oglala were that we're all incredibly hairy, which we pretty much are compared to most Native Americans, and that we're all uncircumcised. I still don't really understand the uncircumcised thing, but I saw that a lot in graffiti. In Gambia, we think you're really nice. Seriously. I live in Bangkok, and here, white people are seen as rich, culturally disrespectful, and for the men, specifically, randy deviants. Also completely unable to eat spicy food. There's a few stereotypes I grew up hearing about in an immigrant mixed race, South Asian and African, family in the West. These mostly seem to be about middle-class white people. Note, I'm simply reporting these, I don't agree with them. I'm writing them as if my grandparents are saying them. For example, white people don't love their kids as much because they kick them out when they're 18 and don't support them after that. Also, white people are not as educationally driven when it comes to their children. For example, they won't work long hours in a multitude of jobs and save pennies to send them to the best schools and hire extra tutors and focus on their kids winning maths championships and stuff. The exception to this is Jewish people who are very admirable. White kids, in turn, put their parents in nursing homes as soon as they're able, which is unacceptable. White people are all into artsy-fartsy things like liberal arts and art school and painting that don't get you anywhere. They don't realize that the only worthwhile paths are medicine, law, engineering, pharmacy, sciences, accountancy, and business. White people eat really bland food, like they eat things like chicken, cooked only in salt and pepper, and carrots in strange creamy sauces. White people like to go to India, Africa, etc. to discover themselves, which is hilarious because then they start wearing saris and things and thinking that if you use curry powder, you've made a curry, and attributing erroneous spiritual wisdom to ethnic people. White people are not as clean. For example, white people will put on clean clothes on an unbathed body in the morning, and they only use toilet paper in the bathroom, as in they only use toilet paper and not water to clean their butts. Also, they wear shoes in the house and own a lot of cats which walk on their kitchen benches. White people are more random about doing the deed, specifically white women. If you take them to a fancy restaurant and give them a rose and chat about poetry, they will sleep with you. Disturbingly, this is according to my grandfather. That's apparently all it takes. Some white people smoke green herb with their kids. White people drink a lot, especially white women who often inexplicably consume wine alone. White people are obsessed with wine. Oh, and one more. White people are too gentle with their kids and don't discipline them properly. See also Russell Peters. Wow, some of these, I won't say white people, but they're accurate to Western culture. Wine, for instance. The first one is funny because in the States at least, the best thing you can do for your kid is make sure they're independent. Americans thrive on the idea of independence. Funny that, to other people, that means you love them less. Out here, we'd find someone weird for living too long with their parents, psychologically weak and codependent. Well, that last one was a real bundle of opinions. Gotta say, this whole thread has been really educational. And no, I won't be doing the accents for some of these cultures, for hopefully very obvious reasons. The stereotype of whites amongst South Asians is that white people can't manage their finances properly, and that they are, in a selfish sense, self-concerned rather than being considerate about others. In that parents kick out kids at 18, and kids throw their parents into old homes, all because they're self-concerned and only care about their own lives. Also, that they can't plan for the future, part of why they're poor with finances. Also, white people, particularly Americans, are scared of everything. Seatbelts, pollution, terror attacks, etc. And by that I mean to an unhealthy level of scared of stuff in their minds. That's generally the stereotype anyway. I've later updated this to address people rightfully bringing up my calling Asians inconsiderate. Keep in mind, the thing of most importance to South Asians is family, and it's family and social circles that they feel deserve the most attention. Given the highly populated natures of these countries and the laissez-faire styled capitalism society, one quickly realizes that being considerate to everybody is shooting yourself in the foot, unless everybody else is also considerate, which is rare. Thus, this consideration is limited to your family and friends. It's not as extreme in South Asia, in that they're willing to help a random stranger if it isn't detrimental to them, but the further extreme in an even more populous country such as China can be seen with the toddler and van accident. So I'm just giving that perspective where they're perplexed by why white people don't have any consideration of the ones they love, family. And you dolts, I don't mean that whites are literally afraid of seatbelts, rather the wearing of seatbelts from fear.
I'm also South Asian, and I think that most of the stereotypes I've heard come from the fact that South Asians, and most Asians for that matter, are very collectivist, while America is becoming more and more individualistic. Therefore, people assume Americans don't care for anyone but themselves and have no respect for family. As someone mentioned, putting your parents in an old folks' home rather than caring for them personally. And have no culture as a byproduct of not having any traditions or community. Interestingly enough, I know many people in my parents' generation who emigrated to the US, who abhor the idea of their children, in my generation, taking care of them in their old age. They like the idea of being independent and have no desire to do the work that generally goes along with staying with your kids, like looking after your grandchildren all day. As a Caucasian who lived in China and other parts of Asia for some years, I'm generalizing a couple of stereotypes I came across. Not everybody has them, of course. White people are all from the US. I'm not, by the way, and can all speak English. White people all have money. White people have more beautiful skin and eyes. White people who marry a local and have a kid will have a very smart child, because it's mixed. White people cannot understand Chinese, so it's fine to talk about them openly even when they're 1 meter away, never mind if they understand every word. Many white people have a more open attitude towards relationships. White people can be more rude, but that's mostly okay because they don't know better. As a white in China, I've pretty much never encountered hatred or open attacks. The racism, for better or worse, slightly favors white, which I suppose has to do with the average income of foreigners there. Chinese have a lot of whitening products advertised, which I suppose may have to do with certain lower status jobs like field workers having more exposure to sun. Hence, they're darker. However, my views are filtered from the racism I as a white encountered. In other words, there may be a lot of stereotypes I've never heard of because nobody told me, or because of the language barrier. I speak a bit, but wouldn't understand everything. All in all, Chinese were incredibly open and friendly, including being openly outspoken about race. Note that the stereotypes some Westerners I talked to had about Chinese were much more brutal than this. They're like ants, uncreative, can't be trusted, etc. were some of the bad racist highlights I encountered. Also note that the stereotypes of Chinese in relation to blacks are worse too. Talking about race, I've asked a couple of Chinese, what would your parents say if you dated a black guy? And the answer was often that the parents would be strictly against this. As a final note, let's repeat. Above stereotypes are not held by all Chinese. Maybe not even the majority. Maybe they're only a minority. They're just some vocal patterns that I ran into. In my family, I was always told by my parents that white people were lazy, never put value on education, and had no culture of their own. It's obviously not my own opinion. Chinese here. My parents think that white people are all divorced. I'm surprised this hasn't already come up. When I lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco for about half a year, any of my friends that were Chinese or Korean thought that all white people never took their shoes off. I was constantly reminded to take my shoes off when entering their houses because they thought we all just walk around the house dragging dirt everywhere. Chinese in China view white people with fascination and curiosity, like they're aliens from the planet Caucasoid. They generally don't have strong negative opinions of white people. However, Chinese expatriates living in the Western world think most white people are extremely selfish and completely tactless. Many are also seen as outwardly polite but inwardly racist to some degree. Some, not all white people, are seen as excessively aggressive and have very incurable alpha male syndrome. They seem to be poor problem solvers, only able to plan 1 or 2 steps ahead. They don't like to think unless they have to. They can be very attractive but age very quickly and seem to gain weight easily, especially the women. They're thin-skinned. And in negotiations, dealing with them bluntly and directly is the preferred approach over diplomatic and passive-aggressive methods. Also, never let white people borrow anything for very long, because after a while, they'll consider it theirs and won't return it. I lived in South America for 9 years, and the predominant stereotype is that white people are rich, entitled, and immoral. White women are seen as easy. The former comes from nearly a century of abuse from the US government and corporations, particularly the latter. US tourists most certainly do not help alleviate this. The latter comes from adult flicks. As a white guy, I ran into a lot of prejudice until people realized I was far more South American than American culturally and spoke perfect Spanish. These feelings mostly manifested in me getting charged roughly 10 times the cost a local would whenever I went anywhere or bought something. Until I began to haggle in Spanish and they realized they'd made a mistake in judging me. I wanted to offer my own experiences and noticed most of the comments up top refer to Asian stereotypes. What names of people you've met made you wonder what their parents were thinking?
Boss's friend named their kid Monster Galileo, followed by their last name. The nurse tried to talk them out of it. They called in child services to talk them out of it. The people insisted. Kid goes by Galileo. Honestly, I kind of like the sound of it for an adult or a performer's name, but being a kid named Monster has to be rough in school.
I feel like you'd be cool as heck in elementary school if you were named Monster. Middle school would be rough, but hopefully by that time you're coasting on the popularity from elementary and just carry the awesomeness forward.
It really depends on your personality. If you end up being a shy kid or do anything embarrassing, that name would be brutal to have. If you're popular or edgy, then it's an awesome name. My boyfriend's grandmother wanted to name her daughter Sunshine. The midwife said that wasn't allowed because it wasn't a real name, and his grandmother had no other baby backup names. So a few minutes later, when she heard someone down the hall screaming, "Tina," she named her daughter Tina because she couldn't think of anything else on the spot. I once met a dude named Lovey. It was a family name. I think it was especially cute because he was such a big, tough guy.
There's a male New Zealand weightlifter named Precious.
My boyfriend was nearly called Egbert, but predominantly Egg for short. I'm glad they decided against it.
I knew a guy named Engbert. I don't know why his parents would call him that because Eng means scary in our language. He was kind of a bully though, so I guess it fits.
I worked at a registrar for a while, and among the birth certificates I got, some of the standouts I saw were Killer, Syphilis, and Sweet Prayer Sunrise. This last one was a boy.
Any idea why someone would want to name their kid Syphilis?
The father gave her both at the same time?
The parents probably heard it somewhere, didn't know what it meant, but liked the ring of it.
My dad knew a girl in school named Bimbo. Bimbo brand bread is one of, if not the largest manufacturer of bread products on the planet. Except it never really took off in America because we don't pronounce Bimbo like the Mexican manufacturer does. They pronounce it Bimbo, not Bimbo. As much as that might explain where the word came from, I can't imagine that being named after a brand of bread would have been much more preferable to the girl. I guess at least the pronunciation might throw people off. Before I was born, my dad wanted to name me Sky, but he thought that replacing the Y with an I would be cute. Thank goodness my mum isn't stupid, or I might have been named Ski. I knew a woman who named her daughter Sunny with an I. White, new age sort of woman. I don't think she realized it, ever. Was that girl always fighting with her sister, Shia? My classmate's mother was a maternity nurse, and she has a couple who wanted to name their son Colin, but wanted to give him a unique spelling for it. I don't understand why parents do this. It doesn't make a boring name more interesting at all. All it does is set your child up for lifelong inconvenience. They spelled it out for her to put on the birth certificate. Colon. They tried to name their son colon, as in the organ attached to your butt. When my classmate's mother explained this to them, they were painfully embarrassed and asked her to write it down with the normal spelling instead. I don't think they'll ever live it down. I went to school with a colon as well. It was not great for him.
Could you pass the salt? Eventually?
Conversely, I went to high school with a kid named Colin, and our physics teacher constantly pronounced it colon. Like, how many times does he have to correct you, lady? In France, there used to be a list of names that you had to choose from, mostly based on that day's name, saint, and 3 to 4 others, which is why there were so many Jean, Marc, Louise, Philippes, Marys, Annes, Valeries, etc. in France. Now it's free choice, but anyone can ask a judge to cancel a name choice and force the parents to suggest one the judge finds acceptable. So no names like Coca-Cola, Xerox, substance names, butthole, Nutella, fruit, devil, blue, murder. Plus the rejected name gets added to a banned list to streamline the rejection in the future. In Denmark, we still have an approved list of names. You can apply for a name to be added, but other than that, you choose from the very long list. Portugal also has a list of names. It's included multiple spellings of the same name. Eric, and Eric with a K are all allowed, though Eric's not really a Portuguese name. And names that aren't just from the Portuguese language. I think they are there so that children of third-generation immigrants can have names from their cultures. However, if at least one of the parents isn't Portuguese, you're allowed to name your child anything that's not offensive. My brother talked my mother out of naming me Mulan because he had a major crush on her and didn't think a sack of potatoes like me deserved to be given her name. I tried to tell someone not to name their kid Tarmac.
They learned the word from NASCAR. They could have just named him Jimmy, Jeff, or Dale.
Not a nurse, but as a med student, a patient wanted to name her child Mudpiles. The nurses silently protested and waited a few days. Mum changed her mind.
Mudpiles, I love it. God, what kind of a kid Mudpiles might have been?
The S at the end really makes it. I wish the mom hadn't changed her mind. I would support baby Mudpiles all the way. I mean, maybe the mom was also a med student, just considering that Mudpiles is a pretty common acronym that med students find helpful.
My ex-husband didn't think it was fair that girls could be named Grace or Hope, etc., and seriously suggested Pestilence, War, or Plague for a boy. His choice for a girl was Tangerine. Fortunately, we never had any children. I'm a Grace, still waiting to meet the pestilence of my dreams.
The thought of meeting someone and then being like, "This is my son Plague and my daughter Tangerine," is killing me, oh my god. Another story where I can bring up Discworld characters. Allow me to introduce Hope, Charity, Chastity, and Prudence Carter, and their brothers Animal Lover, Anger, Deviousness, Covetousness, Jealousy, and Catastrophe. You can't just leave them hanging with that small reference. The Carter parents were a quiet and respectable Lancre family who got into a bit of a mix-up when it came to naming their children. First, they had 4 daughters who were christened Hope, Chastity, Prudence, and Charity, because naming girls after virtues is an ancient and unremarkable tradition. Then their first son was born, and out of some misplaced idea about how this naming business was done, he was called Anger Carter, followed later by Jealousy Carter, Animal Lover Carter, and Covetousness Carter. Chastity was enjoying life as a lady of negotiable affection in Ankh-Morpork, Prudence had 13 children, and Charity expected to get a dollar's change out of 75 pence, whereas the boys had grown into amiable, well-tempered men, and Bestiality Carter was, for example, very kind to animals. My uncle wanted to name his daughter Raider God. I'm glad they settled on Jada. I work in a music store that offers lessons and rents instruments. We have a list of the oddest child names. January, Quest with a W, Sixte, Shebra, Battle, and Shy Ann are just a few on there. The best one was AmITheA. When speaking with the grandmother, she said that the mum wanted to name her Olivia, but the father hated the name. The dad saw a bottle of Aleve on the counter, so he and the mother compromised and came up with AmITheA. Haha, Shebra, followed by her brother, Hebra.
Hijockstrap?
As much as I want to meet someone called Hijockstrap, I imagine that Shebra may have a different culture behind its origin than the others. My dad loves Stevie Nicks and wanted to name all of us Rhiannon, but my mum wouldn't let him. So my oldest sister's name ended up being Stevie Nicole, but now some people always assume she's a guy when they see the name Stevie. Rhiannon is a popular name in Wales. It wouldn't seem unusual here. My sister's name is Rhiannon, but my mom was always scared people would call her Rhea for short, so she only called my sister by her middle name. Kind of funny to type that out. She loved Fleetwood Mac but was too worried to fully commit to the name Rhiannon. I once had a student named Linoleum. Some midwife really dropped the ball on that one. My brother wanted to name our soon-to-be younger brother Corn Peas, and our parents almost went with it, because they felt bad about asking for his input and then rejecting it. Fortunately, they got over that and passed on the name. Cornelius Pearson Smith. Corn Peas for short. Cornelius grew up with a perpetually broken nose thanks to his name. And here my mum was talked out of naming me Violet.
Sounds like an old lady, they said.
Aw, but Violet is such a cool name. I know. Instead, I got one of the most common names of the 80s. When I went to college, I lived in a hallway where there were literally 6 of us. My roommate had the same first name as well. I do like my name because it sounds good with my last name, but I have only once met a Violet in 37 years, and she's my friend's niece. I'm a teacher. There are certain names that each teacher avoids because we've had a student, or 7 with that name, who were difficult in some way or another. One year, there were 4 Dylans in the same cohort, and they were all hell on wheels. One of the teachers at that grade level had a baby with his wife that spring, and she named the kid Dylan. The rest of us were like, "Didn't you vehemently veto that?" He just shrugged and said it was important to her, and he wasn't the superstitious type. Flash forward a few years and I saw a toddler tearing through the salad bar at the grocery store, spilling things, moving spoons from one container to another, reaching in it with his hands. It was Dylan. I haven't ever met a Brian, Brandon, or Braden that wasn't a terrible brat. My late, unlamented brother-in-law was Brian, pain in the butt to be very mild, substance addict, tried to kidnap my child twice, got married on my husband's birthday, etc. Brandon down the street would come into our yard and steal from my kids and harass my cats.
I've always found that any boy named Angel was poorly behaved. This didn't extend to girls, though. Angela, Angelina, and Angelica, they were fine. Boys named Angel are always the worst behaved. Also, Anthony, Bodie, Kevin, Travis, Vincent, and Victor. My rule in general, anything with a V in it will probably be a pain in the neck. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a coworker named Trina. When she was pregnant, she told me that she and her husband had decided to name the baby Latrine. I had to explain to her that she was naming the poor baby after the hole in the ground that soldiers crap into. She was horrified and changed it to Katrina. 2 days after the kid was born, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. I hate to wonder what would have happened to New Orleans if she did name her Latrine. That would have been quite the crap storm.
I have a false leg. My parents had to be talked out of calling me Peggy by the midwife. Oh, you probably could have taken them to court if they called you that. Oh, Peggy Sue.
You could sue for a pretty penny, Peggy.
My mother, who has an odd, to say the least, sense of humor, wanted to name the baby brother Ichabod Rusty. Our surname is Ford. She was determined to call him Itchy Rusty Ford. Tickled herself crapless through the pregnancy. And look, it was funny, I was 12, but everyone thought she was just being her usual goofy self. Apparently, she got attached to it, and at some point Dad just said, "Frick no, we're not naming the baby that." They settled on something much more appropriate. Although these days, I think the little crap might have been better named Itchy Rusty in my opinion. Similarly, our surname is something that can basically mean male member in my language. My dad wanted to name me Elwood if I was a boy. My mum was like, "Woody Wang? No way!" And my dad legitimately saw no issue with that. His second choice was to name me after his father, Harry. Good thing I'm a girl. Not a midwife, but lived with the student midwife when I was a student. The first set of twins she delivered got called Red and Blue. When I worked in a boring admin job dealing with applications from members of the public, I came across Jessica Rabbit. Saw her passport and everything. I just hope that she chose that later in life rather than her parents landing her with it. The worst ones I saw in that job were combinations made by women getting married and taking their husband's surnames, so can't really be blamed on the parents. I took my husband's surname so my initials would no longer be JCB, which is a tractor brand in the UK. My dad knew when naming me and thought it was hilarious. I'm getting married this year, so my initials will soon be MEH. Of all things in life, I can easily say I didn't see that coming.
Hang in there, meh. My wife used to have the initials HOT, which she is, but now is HOR, which she's not so thrilled about. I was originally supposed to be Lex, like Lex Luthor. My dad talked my mum into naming me Alexander and my nickname be Lex, but they just called me Alex.
I always assumed Lex Luthor's full name was Alexander.
Oh, it is. I have a son named Alexander who goes by Lex. It's a perfect name for him, even though he's a very kind and compassionate kid.
As a family medicine resident, I personally delivered 2 different girls named Khaleesi. This was around 2016, well before Season 8. I imagine there might be some buyer's remorse on the parents' part at this point. Yep, I've often wondered about the thousands of children who were called Daenerys or Khaleesi and how they reacted after the Mother of Dragons went full crazy murderer fascist. And I'm just going to say I fricking called it about how that was going to go down. Working as an ERT on overnights, I got called to an OB to help out a lot. One name will always stick with me because of how unfortunate it is for the kid and how ridiculous everything about it was. The mum was deep into crystal and other substance use, and she told us she wanted him named Zion. We were like, "Oh, cool, no problem." So we asked her to fill out the paperwork of everything for us to submit, and put in the chart, and she wrote down Vazion. She looked us dead in the eyes and said, "The V is silent." She also gave him 5 middle names because she didn't know which one was the father, so he got them all.
Should have named that kid Pokemon. Kids caught all the middle names.
I'm neither of these, but I had a classmate in university whose name was Mega Nathan. To date, I don't know why Nathan failed to suffice. When I first read that name, I thought it would be pronounced similar to Afghanistan, Meganathan. On second look, I'm now wondering whether it's actually pronounced Mega Nathan and struggling to decide which is worse.
My dad wanted to name me Snövit, the Swedish name for Snow White, but in the end my parents named me something else. Had my younger brother been a girl, he had been named Tornrosa, meaning thorn rose, which is the Swedish name on Sleeping Beauty. Never did get to the bottom of what my dad's obsession with princesses was all about. My mom is a public school librarian, and the cringiest name she's encountered so far is a girl named Lesme, pronounced like Leslie but with an M. I also have an acquaintance with the last name Forrest, whose father was eventually talked out of naming her Rain. Back in 2000 to 2004, I worked in a hospital doing admin, and an old battle axe of a senior midwife stomped over with this angry-looking pregnant teenager in tow. "Varvara!" Old battle axe roared. "Varvara! Open up that internet-y thing on your computer." Old battle axe didn't know computers, but she was well scary, so I agreed, and opened up the internet-y thing. "Show this ridiculous child the first thing that appears when you type in the word Chanterelle."
The angry, pregnant teenager whined about how it was a pretty name and loads of girls were naming their little girl it, and then she went stone-dead silent when she saw picture after picture of nasty sulfur-yellow mushrooms sprouting out of muddy forest floors.
"Told you, it's a frickin' fungus!"
Old battle axe roared and stamped off to be terrifying and sensible to other pregnant teenagers, leaving me with the angry one. Turned out that the name she'd actually been thinking of was Chardonnay, which is both the name of a very expensive wine and the name of a character in a UK soap opera called Footballers' Wives, which is about as classy as it sounds. The baby got that as a middle name later on, which was fine. The first name was Sophie or something along those lines. That's awesome. The midwife probably acted that way so she could stop future generations from being born with names like Old Battle Axe, although I bet with a name like that she got picked first in sports. All the senior midwives at my hospital had names like that. Old Battle Axe and Iron Lil were the two I remember most vividly. They'd been there since the place was built and were older than God and had absolutely no time for bullcrap. They kept the place impeccable and everyone up to and including the head of the NHS were frightened of them. I once saw Iron Lil take down a drunk and bullying boyfriend with a flying rugby tackle outside of the water birthing room. It was great. I would like to hear more stories about Iron Lil and Old Battle Axe, please.
That sounds incredible. I want to hear all of your stories about these ladies. What awesome lives.
My dad legitimately told my mum that my sister was to be either Jackie Ann after his ex or Lisa Marie after Elvis's daughter. I'm amazed that I was conceived after that. My sister is Lisa. Haha. I wanted to name my daughter Daisy, as it's always been my favorite. Even my husband loved the idea. My whole family said it was a dog's name and they wouldn't let it go, so I didn't name her Daisy. And here I am Pupatai Arevu Danambi, Kalia Perumal.
Oh, hello, fellow South Indian person.
I was almost named Cinderelle. I have no idea what my dad was smoking at the time.
My coworker went to school with a girl named Fallopia. I feel sorry for her, especially when she takes biology classes and they have to talk about fallopian tubes.
I know a teacher who has an elementary-age student with an African name that unfortunately does not translate well into North American English. The kid's name is Akok Ring. And yes, I wish I was kidding. In my high school, there was a kid whose name sounded like the F word when pronounced in English. I kid you not, all of the teachers called him Lucky instead. I don't know the details because he was an upperclassman and I didn't know him personally. My mum wanted to name me Kirby, after her vacuum. Thankfully, my dad talked her out of it.
I currently work with someone whose name is Immunique. I don't think any midwives or nurses were involved with the naming.
I met a child called Immunique once. She was not the only one in her class of first graders named that. You could tell it already annoyed her as she had to spell it out to me and the other adults there. Well, color me surprised that there was more than one child with that name in a single educational institution. Does this come from a TV show or something? Is it the Khaleesi of the 1980s?
My mom had to talk my dad out of wanting to name me Prudence. I wouldn't have minded being called Prudence, but that's just me. Now I have an even weirder name that nobody knows how to pronounce because of a popular TV show.
I feel like going through high school being called Prude would have been rough though.
At least they would have been able to pronounce my name correctly then. A senior guy I was friends with started calling me by an incorrect pronunciation of my first and last names as a joke. Now most of my band does it. It's funny but also confusing for people who don't know my actual name. When I got a solo in marching band, my name was announced over the speaker as that exact wrong pronunciation of my name. I just shared a look of annoyance with the drum major and accepted it as a fact of my life. Also, that senior came back after he graduated to help at band camp this year and educated the freshmen on my incorrect name that they were to call me. I was like, "Thanks, Michael, I really appreciate it."
My mother's name. My grandmother wanted to name her Ishbel, and my grandfather wanted to name her Laura. So they got a baby name book, and the first name they agreed on would be her name. Her name is Wanda. My ex wanted to name my son Jagger, pronounced either Jagger or Jagger, or Schottenjagger. That was a no. Everyone talked me out of naming my daughter Evelyn, and nickname Evie. It's a family name, but apparently it's for older women only.
My wife and I both loved the name Evelyn, and it would have been our daughter's name, but a close coworker had her daughter 2 weeks prior to us and named her Evelyn first. We felt awkward picking the same name, so we settled on our second choice. Also, I think Evie is a cute nickname.
Again, not quite what was being asked, but a friend of mine was almost called Apollo. To be fair, he was born on the day of the first moon landing in 1969, and his dad is Greek. His mum put her foot down, though, and he ended up being Alexander, which is still a good Greek name. Okay, technically Macedonian, but the Greeks claim him too. I was young and stupid in the 80s when my daughter was born. I really wanted to name her Frisbee, because I was just certain that Frisbee last name was going to be the coolest girl in school. Nothing ever came of my bad idea. My daughter's name is Jennifer now. My dad is the third, and I would have been the fourth if I was born a dude. He still wanted to name me Roberta Edwina, his female version. Yikes. When I was in basic training back in the early 2000s, there was a guy whose last name was Starcruiser. I found out from one of his division mates that his full name was Mercury Sun Starcruiser, and that his dad apparently was a massive Star Wars geek after seeing the original way back in the 70s, and that he'd legally changed his last name to Starcruiser. This guy was not in my division, but was in one of the ones that was housed in the same building my division was in. So I'd seen him a few times. Turns out he was also married, and she was in a different division at the time as well. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.